My husband, whose attitude often veered into misogyny, constantly belittled me as a stay-at-home wife. Every time I attempted to assert myself, he would threaten me with divorce. "Challenge me, and we'll get a divorce," he'd warn. Then, one day, I uncovered a secret of his. From that moment on, my respect for him vanished, and I knew it was time for a change. I was done being the submissive wife he could scorn. Armed with the divorce papers he'd prepared, I set my plan into motion. My name is Megan. After losing my father in high school, it was just my mother and me. Thanks to the inheritance he left, I was able to attend an IT vocational school and find a place in the workforce. I was finally starting to give back to my mother. But just as I was finding my footing, she passed away from a sudden heart attack. Feeling completely alone, my savior appeared, my current husband, Scott. After I started at my new job, Scott took it upon himself to mentor me, guiding me through the complexities of the corporate world. He was a pillar of support when my mother passed away, showing genuine concern for my well-being and encouraging me to lean on him more. From that point on, I relied on Scott not just for career advice but for personal support as well. Scott was a constant presence in my life, always leading and reassuring. "Megan, you really can't imagine life without me, can you?" he would often tease. When we began dating officially, he proposed with a promise. "From now on, I'll protect you for the rest of our lives. Let's get married." Following Scott's suggestion, I left my job after our marriage to become a full-time housewife. My new role was to create a comforting home so Scott could focus on his work without distractions. However, living up to Scott's high expectations proved challenging, and I struggled to meet his standards and manage the household chores. "Hey Megan, what did you do all day?" my husband would ask, his tone often tinged with frustration. "I cleaned the room, did the laundry, aired out the comforter, and went shopping for dinner. I also spent time making beef stew." "How is it?" I asked softly. "It's fine, but did you really clean properly?" "Why do you ask?" "There's dust on this shelf." "Oh, I must have missed that. I'll make sure to pay closer attention next time." "If you're home all day, you should make sure the housework is done right." I'm sorry." Scott continued to impose a superior-inferior dynamic in our marriage, just as he did at work. One day, he commented, "What's with this meat and potato stew? Is it not to your liking?" I asked, concerned. "Why is there pork in it? It's supposed to be beef." "In my family, we always use pork for this dish." "That's probably because your family couldn't afford beef," he said dismissively. "Are you implying that my salary isn't sufficient?" "That's not what I meant at all," I replied, trying to explain. Scott would harshly reprimand me whenever things didn't go his way, frequently belittling me for being the child of a single-parent family and lacking common sense. He began spending his weekends away from home. One day, I asked, "Hey, Scott, where do you go every weekend?" His demeanor darkened. "Why do I need to explain my plans to you? It's not about reporting. I'd just like us to spend more time together on weekends. You have the whole week to relax at home while I'm at work. Let me enjoy my days off the way I choose. I'm not asking you to take me out. I just want us to have some quiet time together." "That's exactly what I can't stand," Scott muttered as he stormed off to the bedroom. "I married a woman with no special talents and let her be a housewife. All you need to do is stay quiet and handle the chores." The next day, he handed me a piece of paper. It was a divorce notice with his name already filled in. "What's this?" I asked, shocked and confused. "You don't even know what this is. I guess single mothers don't teach their kids the basics," he replied dismissively. "Scott, are you saying you want a divorce?" "This is a warning," he said coldly. "It's because of that disrespectful comment you made yesterday. If you ever speak to me like that again, I'll divorce you immediately." "But why?" I asked, bewildered. When Scott made that comment, I was left speechless. With no family to turn to, I had nowhere else to go. Since then, I had no choice but to quietly watch him leave every weekend. One day, while cleaning the house as usual, I noticed his computer was still on. As I moved to turn it off, I glimpsed the screen and saw a hotel resort homepage. Could this be a couple's trip? I thought, a flicker of hope brightening my mood. Maybe, despite his harshness, Scott still cared about me. From that day on, I put extra effort into my housework, eagerly waiting for Scott to mention the trip. However, despite my anticipation, he never brought it up. Curiosity got the better of me, and I began checking the computer more frequently. The browsing history revealed that Scott was still searching for hotels. I started to wonder if he was actually planning the getaway for us. One day, while checking the computer again, I saw a reservation confirmation for a hotel on a booking site. The reservation was for the upcoming weekend. It seemed he had finally picked a hotel for us. Eagerly anticipating an invitation, I waited for Scott to mention the trip. By Friday, my patience wore thin, and I asked, "Scott, don't you have something to tell me?" He looked at me, a bit taken aback. "What are you talking about?" I hesitated to press him further about the trip. His mood soured, and he went to bed early. The next morning, I found him already dressed and ready. "Good morning, Scott. Why are you dressed up so early?" "Oh, it's nothing. I'll be leaving once I'm ready. I won't be home today," Scott said curtly before quickly preparing himself and heading out the door. What was going on? Had he changed the reservation? I checked the booking details and saw that the name in the companion section was no longer mine but another woman's. Companion, Lily, 25 years old. In that moment, everything became clear. Scott wasn't planning a trip for us. He was planning the getaway with a young woman named Lily. All my feelings of love, gratitude, and respect for Scott dissolved instantly. Acting swiftly, I decided to verify his affair. I went to the hotel where Scott had made the reservation. When I arrived, I saw him and Lily cheerfully entering the hotel. I made sure to take photos as evidence, firmly imprinting the scene in my mind. When I returned home, I thoroughly examined our computer. After some searching, I found text messages between Scott and Lily, along with photos of them together. Now I had the evidence to confront him. I decided to wait until he came back from his trip. Until then, I spent the day wandering aimlessly and later enjoyed the solitude of my empty house. Scott's usual scolding for my laziness seemed like a distant memory. The following day, I skipped housework, ordered takeout, and spent the day however I pleased. On Sunday night, Scott finally came home. "Welcome back. You're late, aren't you?" I greeted him from the sofa. His eyes widened at the sight of me lounging there. "What's going on?" he asked, bewildered. "What do you mean, what's going on? Why are you surprised to see me still on the sofa?" When I didn't greet him at the door, Scott's anger flared. His eyes fell on the delivery bag on the table, and his frustration grew. "Hey, what's this? Living it up while I'm away?" he demanded. I sighed and replied, "And where were you staying this weekend, Scott? Were you having a good time? If you knew, you wouldn't be acting like this. Sounds like you want to see it again," Scott said, rummaging through a drawer. "Wait, it's not here." His anger erupted. "Where did you hide the divorce papers?" "They're gone." "What?" I asked, confused. Scott's frustration nearly boiled over at my response, but then he let out a sarcastic laugh. "So, that's it," he sneered. "You threw away the divorce papers because you don't actually want to divorce me, thinking I wouldn't leave you. You're truly clueless. It's a shame your mother didn't raise you better." "I don't understand what you're talking about," I said, bewildered. "So you're playing dumb now, huh? Fine, I can get more divorce papers from City Hall anytime. I'll just go get some right now." "I didn't say I threw them away," I replied. "Then where are they?" "They're not here because I've already submitted them," I said calmly. "What? Didn't you hear me? I signed those divorce papers and submitted them to City Hall yesterday." "Wait, you submitted the divorce papers? Do you even know what that means?" Scott asked, bewildered. "Of course I do," I replied. "Submitting the divorce papers means the divorce is finalized." "Are you saying you didn't know that, Scott?" Scott's face turned beet red at my mockery. "Don't mess with me. You lived comfortably on my salary." "Comfortable?" I shot back. "Where's the comfort in a marriage with someone who constantly belittles and ridicules me and never shows any appreciation for all the housework I do?" "Belittle you?" "Absolutely. As a housewife, you're clearly beneath me, the breadwinner. If you're going to act like this, I'm done. Go be on your own and see how foolish you've been. Get out right now." Scott erupted in anger, kicking me out and shouting. Anticipating this, I had already packed my bags. It was the right call. I grabbed my suitcase and left the house with a sense of pride. On impulse, I rented a weekly apartment and spent the night there. The next morning, I noticed an overwhelming number of missed calls from Scott. Just then, he called again. "Oh, what's up?" I answered. "Don't what's up me. Where are you?" "It's none of your business. We're not married anymore. Stop fooling around. The divorce papers you submitted aren't invalid." "But you signed them yourself," I pointed out. "I wasn't serious. You probably acted out of confusion too, didn't you?" After a night's rest, you should be more clear-headed. If you apologize, I'll forgive you. Just come back. I don't think I have anything to apologize for. How dare you test me, your husband? I supported you all this time. If I leave you, you'll be alone again. Is that what you want? I realized something. It's better to be alone than to be with someone who doesn't care about me. I could sense Scott's fury seething on the other end of the phone. Scott's voice thundered through the phone. What? I've made compromises. Fine. I don't care about you anymore. You'll regret this. I'm pretty sure you'll be the one to regret it. You can't do anything. You're just a loser. With that, Scott slammed the phone down in a fit of rage. I used to be terrified of his outbursts, but now I felt a deep sense of contentment. He didn't reach out for several days. Then, a week later, I received a call from him on my cell phone. Megan, what is this bill? After confirming Scott's affair, I had asked my lawyer to file for damages. It seems he had finally received the bill. Oh, did it arrive? The details are all clearly listed on it, I replied. Why should I pay damages? You're the one who walked out. I even offered to work things out, but you stubbornly refused to come back, Scott argued. Actually, you're misunderstanding. The damages are for your affair, I clarified. My affair? With whom and when? Scott demanded. With Lily, 25 years old. You've been seeing her for a year, I said calmly. How do you know? You left plenty of evidence on your computer. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you really believe I was that naive? Scott seemed to doubt my claims. Angrily, he retorted, Evidence? You're lying. There was nothing like that on the computer. Yes, that's right. I knew you weren't stupid enough to leave texts and photos with your mistress on your computer. You can't fool me, I said confidently. Why don't you see for yourself whether I'm bluffing or not? I challenged. I sent Scott the evidence of his affair. His voice immediately turned frantic upon seeing it. How did you get this? I thought I deleted everything. It's true that all the data had been deleted from the computer, but Scott overlooked the fact that I had a certification in IT from vocational school. After some effort, I managed to restore the deleted files and save them. Realizing he couldn't escape the truth, Scott's attitude shifted abruptly. Look, Megan, you don't really want to do this, do you? Yes, I had an affair with her, but it was just a fling. You're the one I truly love. You can't live without me, can you? Scott pleaded. I realized then that this was just his manipulation. Being with you only eroded my self-confidence. Instead of feeling protected, you were destroying my self-esteem. You're just playing the victim, Scott snapped. Without my salary, you wouldn't be able to survive. Sure, you get some harsh words now and then, but that's reality. I can't bear the thought of you, who betrayed me, enjoying yourself while I suffer. I'm holding you accountable for what you've done. That's what the damages are for. Scott finally recognized my resolve and reverted to his usual verbal abuse. Fine, I'll pay. I didn't realize you were such a spiteful person. I felt sorry for you being alone, so I got involved with you, but it was a huge mistake, Scott said, his voice dripping with disdain. Same to you, I retorted. You picked me because you thought you could control me. I should have seen that from the start. You're probably with your mistress, Lily, because she's young and obedient. Pay the damages and go be with her. You'll soon realize that you're destined for a lonely life. Despite his bravado, Scott transferred the agreed-upon amount of compensation to me as required by my lawyer. A few days later, he contacted me again. Megan, could you return some of the money to me? What? I exclaimed, unable to keep my voice down. I've never heard of returning a compensation fee. Besides, after paying the damages and dividing our property, you should still have plenty of savings left, right? Well, that's the problem. My savings are running low. I swallowed my pride to ask you for help, Scott admitted. It turned out that Scott, having invited Lily to live with him, had given her his credit card for emergencies. However, she had started spending recklessly, depleting nearly all his savings. Desperate, he was now turning to me for assistance. Frustrated, I responded, I may have been foolish not to see through you before marrying, but you're just as naive for not noticing your mistress's spending habits until it was too late. I realize now that you're the only one for me, Megan. You must feel lonely being single too, right? Seriously, will you ever grow up? Do you think I'll be single forever? I asked, exasperated. Don't tell me you've found someone else, Scott said, his voice tinged with concern. No, I haven't. And please stop comparing yourself to others. I replied. Well then, what is it? You don't have family anymore, right? He pressed. With the money my parents left me, I've started a new business. I'm surrounded by great colleagues, and I barely have time to feel lonely, I said confidently. You with no special skills starting a business. Scott scoffed. Are you still insisting on that? Can't you just admit that your negative attitude affects everyone around you? I countered. Me ruining? Scott's voice trailed off, incredulous. You belittle others until they lose their confidence and spoil your mistress until she gets out of hand. Unless you change your selfish ways, neither you nor anyone around you will ever find happiness, I told Scott firmly, rejecting him once and for all. After that, he never reached out again. It seems he realized that he could no longer look down on me now that I was successfully running my own business. Rumor has it that Lily dumped Scott immediately after draining all his savings. With his tendency to either belittle or indulge others without forming genuine connections, Scott will likely struggle to find a lasting partner. If anyone is destined for a lonely life, it's Scott, not me. With that in mind, I dedicated myself to my work once more.
Thrown at me instead of a warm greeting during a family gathering just before my son's wedding was a remark that hit hard. In front of me, a baguette from an upscale French restaurant rested on a glass plate, a symbol of unexpected humiliation served by my son's fiancé. I had raised my son, Christopher, on my own, and never did I imagine such a moment of degradation. As a 55-year-old housewife named So, widowed early in life, I had dedicated myself to nurturing Christopher. This year, he turned 25, graduated from college, and secured a job, becoming the pride of my life. Despite his success, he chose to continue living with me in the house left by his late father. I cherished the idea of spending more time with him. However, my world took an unexpected turn when Christopher revealed he had a girlfriend and intended to marry her. Initially shocked, I soon embraced the news with genuine joy, expressing my happiness at his growth. Christopher, still living with me, promised to bring her home soon, but the opportunity didn't materialize. Curiosity and anticipation built up in me, and when I finally asked about her, Christopher shared some details. Her name was Roy, 4 years older than him, and she worked as a tutor from a family of teachers. The revelation surprised me, and I wondered about their relationship, but I patiently waited to meet her. Time passed, and 2 months went by without a meeting. The absence of Roy started feeling intentional. Fate intervened when, by chance, I overheard a conversation during lunch. Seated back to back with a woman, she complained loudly about her upcoming family meeting before the wedding. Intrigued, I listened as she expressed a deliberate intention to delay meeting the family, wanting to test Christopher's commitment to their relationship and prove he was not a mama's boy. The unexpected encounter left me contemplating the dynamics at play, realizing that fate could be both intriguing and frightening. She said it, and I nearly turned around. Christopher's name echoed in the air, causing a slight dizziness. Her friend's advice to Roy, "You need to be more humble," confirmed the woman loudly discussing her future mother-in-law was none other than Christopher's fiancé. Holding my coffee cup, my hand trembled, and my friend, sensing my distress, asked if I was okay. I mechanically ate the recommended dessert, my mind fixated on escaping that place as quickly as possible. Unaware of my presence, Roy continued her complaints about her fiance's family. She belittled the concept of a single mother family, comparing it to her supposedly superior educational background. Roy labeled me a clinging mother and spoke about making Christopher abandon me after the wedding. Fear overwhelmed any anger I felt. The conflict between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had begun prematurely. Even before the family meeting before the wedding, Roy showcased her disdain. Yet, she was the woman Christopher chose. I tried to reassure myself that there must be something wonderful about her. Back home, I attempted to calm my nerves, resolving not to tell Christopher about this incident. Alone, I stopped pushing him about the family meeting. I knew she had no intention of attending, and I refused to continuously be looked down upon by being too accommodating. Christopher sensed my change of heart, but didn't press further. "It's okay if you're busy, whenever it's convenient for you," I told him, trying to ease his burden. The wedding plans between Christopher and Roy seemed to progress faster than the family meeting. Spotting a wedding venue brochure on the living room table, I realized the countdown had begun. I contemplated speaking up about the wrong order of things, but refrained for my son's sake. Making a fuss would lead to accusations of being unable to let go or being a mama's boy. Faceless accusations that would upset me. Christopher was crucial to me, but he was an independent adult. I had refrained from interfering more than necessary, demonstrating my tolerance. One morning, Christopher abruptly announced a family meeting with the parents-in-law. They had reserved a fancy French restaurant, and he wanted me to come. The meeting was scheduled in 2 days, a sudden announcement that left me a bit irritated. Shouldn't such things be planned after matching everyone's schedules? I held back my frustration, saying, "All right, I haven't formally met Roy yet, so it's good to meet her sooner." Christopher apologized for the sudden plan, but in my mind, it was Roy and her family who should be apologizing, not him. I reassured him that it's fine. On the day of the family meeting, Christopher and I arrived at the designated upscale French restaurant. I felt a bit nervous, it being my first time at such a fancy place. Christopher chuckled, acknowledging the nerve-wracking atmosphere. As we gave our name to the staff, we were guided to a private room where Roy's family had already gathered. Roy and her mother, Mara, were present. Excusing ourselves, I'd opened the door to the private room. Seated there were Mara, exuding a definite teacher vibe, and Roa, sporting slightly flashy makeup. Her dress seemed mismatched, likely chosen by Mara for the occasion. Roy and Mara remained silent until I finished my greetings, their scrutiny palpable as if evaluating me as a lesser presence. Christopher, familiar with Mara, greeted her with "long time no see." Mara chuckled, mentioning she had been looking forward to meeting the famous mother, a slight sting in her mention of single mother. Suppressing any reaction, I played it down, emphasizing Christopher's inexperience and suggesting they take care of him. Mara, contentedly nodding, maintained an air of superiority. Her demeanor hinted at how she might treat her students and their parents, an attitude I wouldn't desire for my child. She invited me to sit, yet Roy hadn't greeted me. With reluctance, I initiated conversation, prompting Roy to respond with a mocking snort, deeming repetition inefficient. Her arrogant remark stirred anger within me, but I restrained my temper. She was the woman Christopher had chosen. I feigned calmness, acknowledging her comment with forced civility, though I felt close to my limit. Mara informed us that Roy's father would be late due to work, suggesting we proceed without him. Roy then made a seemingly innocent comment to Christopher, insinuating his lack of exposure to such lavish food due to his past poverty. Christopher, unfazed, went along with her comment. I always knew Christopher to be kind and patient, but this situation seemed beyond that. Concerns about how he navigated society started to creep in. Was he possibly being taken advantage of? A parental worry nagged at me. Ignoring the odd expressions from Roy and Mara, I suggested we enjoy the feast. However, their unpleasant smiles intensified, and the reason behind their mockery soon became apparent. As the first dish arrived on a beautifully decorated plate, I couldn't help but exclaim at the sight of a simple baguette on a glass plate. Roy and Mara seemed to find this hilariously amusing, laughing heartily at my shocked expression. It turned out that the owner of the upscale French restaurant was Mara's brother, and they had collaborated to ridicule me. "The poor that suits you best," Roy said, openly mocking me. Christopher, seemingly pale, and I were left in disbelief. Trying to contain my anger, I muttered about how this supposedly suited a poor person like me. Roy misinterpreted my reaction, thinking I was crying. Dismissing it, she laughed even harder. Surprisingly, Mara, who might be expected to scold Roy, only said, "Oh dear, Roy," without any intention of reprimanding her. I couldn't bear the idea of such individuals becoming part of my family. Just as I raised my bowed head, Roy's father entered, apologizing for being late. Witnessing the baguette situation, he seemed taken aback. Roy proudly explained that she had the baguette prepared, thinking I, raised in poverty, hadn't experienced such cuisine. Her father scolded her for taking the joke too far, but couldn't hide his amusement. The thought of them becoming my family was unbearable. As the father turned pale, I looked up and recognized him. Cedric, the principal of a private high school where I had been facing difficulties. I expressed my surprise, and he exclaimed in shock, revealing that he had become the principal 3 years ago. Instead of dwelling on educational policies, I couldn't resist suggesting he pay more attention to education at home, especially considering the insult from his daughter, something I vowed never to forget. I said, staring down at him. He had always berated me, claiming that a single mother couldn't be a principal. He had spread rumors that I couldn't properly educate my own child. Roy, realizing the impact of her actions, seemed taken aback. Marcia trembled, lost for words. I looked at each member of Roy's family and slowly bit into the baguette. The sound of me crunching echoed in the room. Delicious, as expected of a high-end French restaurant's baguette. How about it, Cedric? I'd offered, smiling as I held out the glass plate with the baguette. His hand trembled amusingly as he took it. Don't get the wrong idea. I'd always separate work and personal life. Your dismissal has always been a topic at the board meetings. I was the one opposing it. Without rivalry, there's no momentum for reform. But your role ends here, I declared, giving him a final warning. In fact, I had evidence of him accepting bribes during admissions, manipulating interviews, and enjoying a luxurious life with that money. I was still deciding whether to pursue criminal charges, but if he left the school quietly, I was willing to let it go. Christopher, let's go home. She may be this kind of lady, but can you still see her as a marriage partner? I won't stop you if you choose her, I said to Christopher, whose gaze was fixed on the baguette Cedric held out to him. Roy, with a strange smile, whispered, "You'll marry me, right?" Thinking that marrying him was her only way to save Cedric's position, her pleading eyes turned to him. He looked down, gripping his hands on his knees. The engagement is off. This marriage is as if it never happened, he declared. It's just a joke. I didn't mean to mock you. It's a joke, Christopher. You're so stiff. Roy desperately tried to cover up. If that wasn't mockery, then what was it? I was amazed that she couldn't come up with a better excuse. He looked at Roy with an unexpectedly cold gaze. Roy, you've been given a lot by your parents, education, and love. But I believe I received even more from my mom. Seeing her work was cool. She's still cool, he declared. He could never forgive her for mocking me and expressed pity for the students she was teaching. I wouldn't want to be taught by someone like her. I heard bad rumors about you but chose to believe otherwise. You betrayed that trust, he said, causing tears to stream down Roy's face. She seemed to finally understand the irreversible damage done. Wait. You're joking about the breakup, right? I bragged about getting married to my friends. I can't break it off. It's embarrassing, she pleaded tearfully. What's most necessary for you now is to reflect on how things came to this. We probably won't see each other again, but I hope you grow, I said. As Christopher and I were about to leave the private room, Cedric grabbed his shoulder to stop him. Christopher shook off his hand as if it were something filthy. I've been patient, but let me say this clearly. What's wrong with being raised by a single mother? Did you see Roy's vulgar behavior? Raised by respectable parents. You should be more ashamed, he said firmly. Cedric had no response and looked down in shame. Roy's cries echoed in the private room as we left the restaurant. The moment we stepped outside, we heard Cedric's angry voice, probably yelling at Roy. Christopher, you need to be more discerning in choosing women. When I said that, he scratched his head and mumbled, It's embarrassing. Apparently, Roy had aggressively pursued him, and Christopher, who tends to be easily swayed, fell into that situation. It was clear that Roy saw an opportunity in him. Regardless, I expressed relief that everything came to light before the marriage as we headed home. The engagement ended amicably. Roy initially demanded compensation, but Christopher dismissed it logically, explaining to his lawyer that Roy was entirely to blame for the broken engagement. The compensation demand was dropped, and when threatened with a lawsuit, Roy quickly backed down. Perhaps her parents advised her not to escalate the situation further. Though I usually keep work and personal life separate, Cedric had to leave the school due to the bribery issue during admissions becoming public. Faced with the choice of leaving quietly or going to court, he opted for the former. Unemployed and desperately seeking a new job, he faced the challenge of overcoming the bad rumors that spread fast in the industry. Roy, having resigned from her tutoring job, was reportedly confined to a room in her parents' house, too embarrassed to even seek new employment. Marcia, burdened with 2 unemployed adults, was allegedly preparing for divorce, as she couldn't maintain her previous luxurious lifestyle. She wanted to use her earnings solely for herself, citing that as her reason for divorce. A logical decision, perhaps, but one that led to the family's downfall. While I feel a bit sorry for her, I believe it's her responsibility. Sometimes after the incident, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in a while. Christopher introduced me to a wonderful woman, a single mother working at the same place as him. She has a daughter about to turn 3, and it seems she was the one who lifted Christopher's spirits after the broken engagement with Roy. She is bright and sunny, and her daughter is fond of Christopher. Despite the roundabout journey, I am slightly relieved that Christopher seems to be on his way to building a happy family. Maybe, despite the challenges, I'll even become a grandmother.
I never thought I'd see our family's century-old farm sold off like a cheap roadside souvenir, but that's exactly what happened last spring. Standing in our weathered kitchen, watching my parents sign away 5 generations of history to the Highland Development Corporation, I felt physically sick. "Mom, Dad, please," I begged one last time, my hands gripping the worn edges of Grandpa Joe's old oak table. "This land has been in our family since 1923. You can't just sell it to become another soulless subdivision." Mom didn't even look up from the contract, her manicured nails flipping through pages with practiced efficiency. After her promotion to senior partner at her law firm last year, she'd stopped having time for anything that didn't come with a hefty price tag attached. "Sarah, honey," she sighed, using that condescending tone that made me feel like I was still 12 instead of 28. "It's just empty farmland. The crops barely break even anymore, and the development company is offering $3 million. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money?" Dad at least had the decency to look somewhat conflicted, his weathered farmer's hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Your mother's right, Princess. Times change. We're not farmers anymore. Haven't been since your grandfather passed." The memory of Grandpa Joe hit me like a physical blow. He passed away just 6 months ago, and already they were dismantling everything he'd built, everything he loved. "He trusted you to protect this place," I said quietly, my voice trembling. His last words were about the farm. His last words were delirious ramblings about treasure and secrets. Mom cut in sharply. "Really, Sarah, I expected this kind of romantic nonsense when you were younger, but you're an agricultural scientist now. Be practical." That was rich, coming from her. Mom hadn't spent a single day working this land. She hadn't been there during the drought of 2015 when Grandpa Joe and I worked 18-hour days to save what crops we could. She hadn't helped us dig irrigation channels or repair fences or deliver calves in the middle of the night. She hadn't been there when Grandpa Joe would sit on the old porch swing every evening, telling stories about our ancestors who'd built this place from nothing, about great-great-grandfather William Montgomery who'd first claimed this land, who'd chosen this specific plot for reasons he'd only ever share with his own son. "The land keeps its secrets," Grandpa Joe used to say, his eyes twinkling. "And one day, when the time is right, it'll share them with someone worthy." Mr. Davidson, the development company's representative, cleared his throat politely. "Mrs. Montgomery, if you could initial here and here." His eager voice snapped me back to the present. I watched in helpless fury as my parents signed away our heritage. 500 acres of prime Pennsylvania farmland, land that had sustained our family through the Great Depression, through wars and droughts and everything in between, reduced to nothing more than dollar signs in their eyes. 30 days, Mr. Davidson said smoothly, gathering up the contracts. We'll begin preliminary surveys next week, but you'll have 30 days to vacate the property completely. The company is happy to provide moving services, of course. That won't be necessary, Mom replied briskly. We've already purchased a condo in Philadelphia. Sarah can handle clearing out the farmhouse. It'll give her time to adjust to the situation. I stared at her, blindsided. They'd already bought a condo. How long have they been planning this? Of course, Dad added quickly, you're welcome to come live with us, Princess. There's no need for you to stay at that little research facility. With your degrees, you could get a corporate job in the city. I'm staying at the Agricultural Research Center. I cut him off. My work on sustainable farming practices actually matters to people who care about the land. Mom's lips thinned with disapproval. Still throwing away your potential on playing in the dirt. At least this sale means we won't have to watch good land go to waste on your experimental organic farming notions anymore. The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. I'd spent the last 3 years implementing new farming techniques on our land, working with the research center to prove that traditional family farms could be both sustainable and profitable. The test plots had just started showing promising results. But none of that mattered now, not to them. Mr. Davidson stood, offering his hand to my parents. Congratulations on the sale. Highland Development will transform this property into the most exclusive residential community in the county. The Montgomery Farm Estates will keep the name, of course, to honor the heritage. I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing my jacket, I stormed out of the kitchen and into the crisp spring morning. The farm stretched out before me, morning mist still clinging to the fields where the first green shoots of this year's crops were just beginning to emerge. Near the old barn, a pair of red-tailed hawks circled lazily, the same mating pair that had nested on our property for the past decade. Soon their hunting grounds would be covered in concrete and asphalt, their ancient oak tree cut down to make way for some millionaire's mansion. Sarah, wait. Dad's voice called from behind me, but I kept walking, heading for the back fields where Grandpa Joe and I had spent so many hours working side by side. It was where he taught me everything he knew about farming, about respecting the land and its rhythms. The memories flooded back as I walked. I was 5 years old, sitting on his shoulders as he checked the irrigation lines. 10 years old, helping him mend fences and learning the property's boundaries. 15, driving the tractor for the first time, his patient voice guiding me through the gears. And just last year, 27 years old with a PhD in agricultural science, showing him the results of my organic farming trials. His eyes had lit up with pride as he'd examined the improved soil samples, the increased crop yields. You see it, don't you? He'd asked that day, his voice already weakened by the cancer that would take him just months later. You understand what this land can do, what it can be. I'd nodded, not realizing then that we were running out of time, that he was trying to tell me something important. A glint of metal caught my eye, pulling me from my memories. I was standing near the old stone wall that marked our property's southern boundary, and something was reflecting the morning sun. Bending down, I brushed aside some loose dirt to find a small brass key, old and green with age. My breath caught. I recognized it immediately. It was the key to Grandpa Joe's old study in the barn, the private space where he kept all his farm records and family documents, the room he'd specifically left to me in his will, though I hadn't been able to bring myself to go through it since his death. The land keeps its secrets, his voice whispered in my memory, until the time is right. Looking back toward the farmhouse, I could see the development company's sleek black SUV pulling away down our long gravel drive. My parents' car followed shortly after, heading toward their new city life without a backward glance. They'd given me 30 days to clear out generations of history, 30 days to say goodbye to everything I loved. But standing there with Grandpa Joe's key in my hand, watching the morning sun climb over fields that had sustained my family for 100 years, I felt something else stirring beneath my grief and anger. Hope. Grandpa Joe had never done anything without a reason. He'd never simply given up or taken the easy path. And in those final days, he tried to tell us something about the farm. Something my parents had dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man. But what if they were wrong? What if the land really did have secrets to share? And what if just maybe I had 30 days to discover them? The key felt warm in my palm as I closed my fingers around it, my decision made. I might not be able to stop the sale, but I could spend these last days uncovering whatever Grandpa Joe had wanted us to know. I owed him that much. I owe the land that much. Behind me, the hawks called out, their cries carrying across fields that had witnessed a century of Montgomery family history. Soon, those fields would be gone, transformed into another cookie-cutter luxury development. Unless Grandpa Joe had left behind something that could change everything. Something hidden in that old study, waiting for someone worthy to discover it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a smile tugging at my lips. 30 days might just be enough time after all. Game on, Highland Development. Game on. The old barn study smelled exactly like I remembered. A mixture of leather, paper, and the special pipe tobacco Grandpa Joe used to smoke. Standing in the doorway, key still warm in my hand, I felt his presence all around me. The afternoon sun filtered through dusty windows, illuminating dancing motes in the air and casting long shadows across his massive oak desk. I hadn't been in here since before his passing. The room looked frozen in time. Farming journals stacked neatly in one corner. His favorite leather chair still pulled away from the desk as if he'd just stepped out for a moment. A half-finished cup of coffee, long since dried up, sat next to a worn notebook. "Okay, Grandpa," I whispered, running my fingers along the desk's smooth surface. "What were you trying to tell us?" The study wasn't large, maybe 15 feet square, but every inch held purpose. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with agricultural references, family photo albums, and meticulously maintained farm records dating back decades. The 4th wall featured a large map of our property, yellowed with age but carefully preserved under glass. I started with the desk drawers, working methodically. The first 2 contained ordinary items, office supplies, more farming journals, equipment manuals. But the bottom drawer was locked. My hands trembled slightly as I tried the old brass key. It fit perfectly. Inside, I found a single leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The inscription on the first page made my heart skip. Property of William Montgomery, 1923. My great-great-grandfather's journal. The man who first claimed this land. I carefully turned the pages, his elegant handwriting bringing the past to life. After months of searching, I finally found it. The geological surveys confirm what the old tales suggested. This land is unique. The mineral deposits alone would make a man wealthy, but that's not why I chose it. There are greater treasures here, things that must be protected. A sharp knock at the barn door made me jump. Through the study window, I could see a Highland Development truck parked in our drive. Quickly tucking the journal into my bag, I headed downstairs. 2 men in corporate polo shirts were waiting, looking impatient. "Miss Montgomery?" The taller one stepped forward. "I'm Steve Randall, Chief Surveyor for Highland. We need to begin our preliminary work today." I straightened my spine, channeling Grandpa Joe's quiet strength. "The contract gives us 30 days before you can start any development work." "The contract gives you 30 days to vacate," he corrected smoothly. "We can begin surveys immediately. We have permits." He held up an official-looking document. My mother's signature was clearly visible at the bottom. She must have signed additional paperwork without telling me. "Fine," I said tightly, "but stay away from the old barn. We're still clearing out personal property." Steve's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, we'll start with the back acreage." I watched them drive their equipment toward the fields, my mind racing. The journal in my bag felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I needed time to understand what great-great-grandfather William had discovered, what Grandpa Joe had been protecting all these years. Back in the study, I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything while continuing to read the journal. Hours slipped by as William's story unfolded. He'd spent years researching the specific plot of land before claiming it, following historical records and geological surveys. There were detailed maps, coordinates, and references to something hidden beneath the property. But what really caught my attention were the soil samples. "The mineral composition is unlike anything I've seen," William wrote. "Preliminary tests suggest rare earth elements in concentrations that shouldn't be possible in this region. But there's something else, something the tests can't explain." My hands froze over the keyboard. Rare earth elements, those were crucial for modern technology. Everything from smartphones to electric cars needed them. And they were becoming increasingly scarce. A memory surfaced. Last year's soil samples from my agricultural studies. I'd noticed some unusual readings but had been focused on organic farming applications. I hadn't thought to test for mineral content. The sound of heavy machinery startled me from my research. Looking out the window, I saw several excavators moving into position near the backfields. They weren't just surveying, they were preparing to dig. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Highlands Board is meeting next week to finalize construction plans. Don't interfere with their work. This is happening whether you like it or not. I started to reply, then stopped as another memory hit me. Last Christmas, Grandpa Joe insisting we watch an old documentary about mining rights and mineral laws. At the time, I thought he was just being nostalgic. Now I wondered if he'd been trying to tell us something else. Opening a new browser tab, I began researching Pennsylvania property laws. 3 hours and several legal databases later, I sat back, my mind reeling from the implications of what I'd discovered. The original deed to our property, filed by William Montgomery in 1923, included something called mineral rights in perpetuity. These rights were specifically excluded from any future sale of the surface property, meaning they still belonged to the Montgomery family trust. If there really were valuable minerals under our land, Highland Development couldn't touch them without our permission. They couldn't even dig foundations without risking a lawsuit. But I needed proof. Hard scientific evidence of what lay beneath our fields. My hands shaking with excitement, I called Dr. Chen at the Agricultural Research Center. "Sarah," she answered on the first ring. "I heard about the farm. I'm so sorry. I need a favor," I said quickly. "Remember those unusual soil samples from last year's study? Can we run a full mineral analysis? I mean everything. Rare earth elements, heavy metals, the works." "That's expensive," she cautioned, "and it'll take time. I have some grant money left, and I only need a few days. Please, Dr. Chen, this is important." She sighed. "Bring them in tomorrow morning. I'll see what I can do." Next, I called Tom Harrison, my best friend from college who now worked as an environmental lawyer in Pittsburgh. "I need you to look at some property documents," I said without preamble, "specifically mineral rights from the 1920s. How fast can you get here?" "I can come tomorrow," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Sarah, what's going on?" "I think my great-great-grandfather left us something more valuable than just farmland, and I think Grandpa Joe spent his whole life protecting it." After hanging up, I returned to William's journal, reading well into the night. The more I read, the more convinced I became that he'd chosen this land for very specific reasons that could change everything. But Highland Development's machines were already here, their corporate machine rolling forward with the inevitability of a steamroller. I had days, maybe hours, before they started seriously excavating. I needed to buy time. The next morning, I was waiting when Steve Randall and his crew arrived. "I'm invoking a temporary stop work order," I announced, holding up a stack of papers Tom had helped me prepare over the phone last night. Steve's face darkened. "You can't do that. We have contracts." "Check with your legal department," I said firmly. The mineral rights were excluded from the sale. Any excavation could be considered mining activity without proper permits. Your company could face significant fines. "This is ridiculous," he snapped, but I noticed him pulling out his phone and stepping away to make a call. By that afternoon, the excavators were being moved off our land. I bought myself a few days, but I knew it was temporary. Highland Development hadn't built their empire by giving up easily. But as I watched their trucks drive away, I felt Grandpa Joe's presence beside me, almost as if he were still here, still protecting our land. "I won't let you down," I whispered. "I'll find what you were trying to tell us. I'll protect what's important." The hawks circled overhead, their cries carrying across fields that suddenly held more mystery than I'd ever imagined. Somewhere beneath that rich soil lay secrets that had been guarded for a century, secrets that might just save everything we held dear. And I had a feeling we were running out of time to uncover them.
"I just had a baby. I expect a $5,000 baby shower gift from you." This outrageous message came from Jessica, the detestable being who stole Michael from me. She had lied about being pregnant to steal him away, leading to our divorce. Even though I've tried to forget that day since remarrying, her presence still disrupts my peace. She hasn't changed, still stirring up trouble without a care. I can hardly believe she's my real sister. But now that this message has arrived and been seen by John, Ignoring it isn't an option. Reluctantly, I agreed to attend the celebration since John suggested we go. John seems to have a plan. He's a warm and kind person, but hates dishonesty. He's smart and skilled at turning work situations to his advantage, so I trust he has a strategy in mind. She can laugh about it now, but soon she'll have to face the music for all her wrongdoings. Nail me, John Johnson. I've been working as an office assistant in a local company since I graduated from college. I've been dating someone since my college days. Back then, through our club activities, I met Michael Smith, a medical student at the same university. His dad is a renowned allergy specialist, so it seems Michael is aiming to become a doctor too. His father's clinic is super popular, with patients from all over the country seeking treatment there. Being the only son of a solo practitioner and heir to a well-known clinic, my first impression was that he was a smart, well-off guy. But that was just my bias. Apparently, talking to him, I found he was quite unique, and we both liked the same film director's work. I wanted to get to know him better, so I made the first move. Hey, have you seen the new movie by that director? If not, want to go see it together? A woman who likes those films. That's a bit surprising. Absolutely. Really, I don't have many fans in my circle. I'm so glad I can watch it with you. My efforts paid off, and he began to see me as someone special. Our relationship continued not just through college but afterwards too, and Michael proposed to me when I was 25. I'm still learning to be a doctor, but in the future, I want to take over my dad's clinic and be a great doctor. I want you, Naomi, to be there to see it all. Will you marry me? Of course, I'd be delighted. Let's have a happy life together. I was on top of the world, pregnant right after getting married. Michael would definitely be a great dad, boy or girl. As long as the baby was healthy, that was all that mattered. Michael was probably just as excited for the birth, but then my happiness shattered. I suffered from severe morning sickness, constantly battling nausea and feeling unwell. I couldn't keep up with my job post-college and had to resign. Fighting my morning sickness at home, I had eating morning sickness, needing to constantly eat to stave off the nausea, surrounded by empty pastry bags where I always sat. I'm home, Naomi. What's happened to this place? It's a mess with all these snacks and bread bags. Sorry, I've been too sick to clean up. You're not working, and you've put on so much weight. It's hard without eating. I was always eating because of my morning sickness. Despite being early in my pregnancy, I had gained 22 lbs compared to before, not doing housework and just eating. You're like a pig who's given up on being late. That's harsh. He laughed mockingly at me, someone who could barely move during her morning sickness. I couldn't believe he could be so cruel. Was my judgment that off? Maybe once the baby was born, Michael would return to his kind self. I held on to that faint hope, but it too would soon crumble. One day, my sister Jessica came to visit. Oh, Naomi, you are here. What a mess, though. Sorry for the mess. That's fine. I'm used to this place, like a second home. There she was, my sister Jessica, appearing before a warning out me, struggling with morning sickness and feeling awful. Jessica occasionally visits our home, but at that moment, I was too unwell to properly entertain her. Hoping a little chat might distract me, I decided to start a conversation. You know, it looks like the baby in my belly is a girl. I keep thinking about dressing up and going shopping together someday. Wow, I didn't know you were thinking about things like that. Does Michael know? It's going to be a girl. Girl? Yeah, I told Michael right away. It's a girl. And you know, I dream of wearing matching outfits with my child. Jessica, you've always been so stylish. I'm counting on your advice when the time comes. Then Jessica turned around, smiling meaningfully. That's right. Michael is still a rookie doctor, but he'll eventually take over the family clinic. Poor Michael, having you as a clinic director's wife. Stop it, Jessica. That's too harsh. You really have a sharp tongue. Jessica is quite sarcastic and sometimes says things that hit hard. As her younger sister, I've gotten used to it over the years. Still, it can be quite tough when I'm feeling unwell. But Jessica quickly returned to her usual smile and waved her hand. Sorry, I just slipped into my usual mode. So, Naomi, anything bothering you lately? Bothering me? Well, Michael's been coming home late lately. He's a doctor, so it's unavoidable. But he seems to be at the hospital all the time, even on weekends. We hardly have time to talk these days. I see. Well, it's no surprise, considering someone like you claims to be a doctor's wife. I felt a chill at Jessica's icy smile. What I came to talk to you today, as she said this. Jessica glanced toward the living room door, then entering from the living room door was Michael. Michael, did you get off work early from the hospital today? I need to talk to you. Let's get a divorce. What kind of joke is this? What do you mean? As soon as I got back, I couldn't understand what Michael was saying at all. I knew he wasn't the type to make such a terrible joke at a time like this, especially since we had been together since college, and I was carrying his child. See, your beloved husband is saying this. You should listen to his request and let go quickly. What, Jessica? Michael looked at me awkwardly. I can't see you as a woman anymore after you kept eating and gaining weight. But this is morning sickness. I feel sick if I don't eat. Jessica looked triumphantly at me. That's the way it is, and the baby in your belly being a girl. She won't be the heir to the Smith Clinic. But in my belly, I carry Michael's child, a suitable heir. Jessica, I felt a sinking feeling as I watched Jessica lovingly stroke her belly. I'm 3 months pregnant and it's a boy, according to the tests. You can't be serious, Michael. What are you doing while I'm going through all this pain? That's why all your excuses, quitting your job and just eating all the time, are unacceptable. I'm tired of watching you lying around, constantly eating snacks. I take care of myself so I don't have morning sickness, even when pregnant. I won't lose my self-control and eat like a pig, unlike you. I was at a loss for words, seeing Jessica's smug face and Michael looking down at the floor, guilt-ridden. Jessica, being pregnant with a boy, I didn't know. But as an heir, I want a son. I prefer a beautiful wife like Jessica over a woman who keeps gaining weight without restraint. That's just wanting an heir and a beautiful wife is your own selfish desire, isn't it? I'll pay alimony, so let's part without any fuss. Seeing Michael apologizing, I knew that things could never go back to how they were. After that, Michael and I divorced, and I gave birth to our daughter as a single mother. His promise of alimony turned out to be just words, with no actual payment. Post-delivery, I had to work to survive since I had no one to rely on. Not knowing what else to do, I took a job at a nearby department store that's hiring. Life is unpredictable. My hard work and character caught the attention of someone. It was John Johnson, a well-regarded manager in the external sales department. Tough day. You're always working hard. Thanks. I'm about to finish up soon. Are you done for the day, John? Yeah, there's this great Italian place nearby. I want you to try, Naomi. And it's a little gift for your daughter. Through light conversations every time we met, we were drawn to each other and began dating, which led to our remarriage. Naomi, I might be a guy 20 years older than you, but I sincerely want to make you and your daughter happy. Will you marry me? Are you sure about me? I'd be delighted. Life after remarriage was truly blissful, a gentle husband, my daughter, and I lived a peaceful life. However, I failed to notice the ominous footsteps creeping closer to our tranquil days. One day, Jan had work, but I was off. Just as I thought of having a leisurely tea, an email arrived. It was from Jessica, and the content was shocking. A baby is born. I'm expecting a $5,000 baby shower gift. A sigh escaped me in front of that curt email. 5 years ago, Jessica had an affair with Michael and snatched him away. Now this and $5,000 for a baby shower gift seemed too much. I can't forget that day, nor can I, even if I tried. The expressions on Jessica and Michael's faces back then, the way they sought happiness together, ignoring my suffering from morning sickness, was unforgivable. I was at a loss on how to respond to Jess's email. Then, John returned from work, noticing something was off, and asked with concern, "What's wrong, Naomi? You look pale." "Oh, John, it's a message from my sister. She had a baby." "The sister who married your ex-husband, Michael?" "Yeah. I don't want to see her face or hear from her. Plus, she's asking for a $5,000 baby shower gift." As John listened and looked at my phone, he suddenly said, "Wait, this Jessica Smith name, you know her?" "I didn't mention her when we got married because I didn't want to remember." "Yeah, I've never been introduced to her by you, but I wonder." John, pondering while looking at the email, seemed to recall something. "We didn't properly greet her during our wedding, so let's visit her now. Also, I just remembered something I needed to do back at the department store." He then hurriedly prepared to leave, going back to the department store now. "Sorry, there's something I need to do." A few hours later, John returned with a thick file. "Is it okay if we visit your sister, Jessica, 2 weeks from now on Sunday? We both have the day off, and I'd like her to meet my parents and cousins too." "Your parents and cousins too." "Jessica loves being the center of attention, so she'll probably be fine." "But why?" "I've heard your ex-husband, Michael, is famous for allergy treatment. My family has a history of allergies. Thought we might get some good advice." I remembered hearing from friends that Michael had taken over his father's allergy clinic. Michael's dad was an authority on allergy treatment, and Michael became an allergist too, a friend told me. "Okay, I'll contact Jessica." Jessica quickly agreed when I contacted her. "I want to see the baby, and we'll bring a gift." "Can I bring some relatives too?" "They really want to meet you." "Of course, the more guests, the more gifts. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Sunday." 2 weeks later, on Sunday, I visited Jessica's house with John, his parents, and relatives, including his cousins, in a quiet residential area. Her stylish house stood next to the clinic, its white walls gleaming. John's parents and relatives were surprised by its luxurious design, excited to meet the renowned allergist. "Welcome. I've been waiting for you." "Long time no see, Jessica. You look happy." "Of course. I was worried about my first childbirth, but it all worked out in the end." I felt something off in Jessica's words. "First childbirth? Didn't you say you were pregnant with a boy before?" "Oh, did I not tell you? I miscarried that time, so this is my first." John, standing beside me, nodded meaningfully. Seeing John's face, Jessica started to tremble. "Oh, hello. Nice to meet you." "Hello, you must be Naomi's sister. I heard a bit about the miscarriage." "Yes, but I don't want to remember the miscarriage." Jessica turned her face away in a huff and started to walk off. "Sorry about that." "Oh, there's something I wanted to give you, Jessica." "What? Something for me?" Jan handed her an envelope. It's pastel color, and the word "Congratulations" written on it. Thick enough to be noticeable even from the side. "Here you go. I wanted to give this to Jessica personally." "Got it right. Just what I've been waiting for." I glanced at John and whispered to him, "Hey, we aren't rich, and we don't have to give Jessica the $5,000 she asked for." But John, unfazed, pet me off. "It's fine. Trust me. You'll understand if you watch." "What do you mean if I watch?" While we were talking about the envelope, Jessica had already started opening it. "I need to check if it's exactly $5,000. With this thickness, it might even be $10,000. The cute envelope was torn open with a ripping sound. Jessica's face clouded over the moment she opened it. "What's this?" John stepped forward with a salesperson's smile to explain. "Mrs. Jessica Smith, this is a detailed statement of your purchases at the department store over the past 5 years. You said to put it on my tab, and this is the amount you've accumulated to date." "What are you talking about? I don't know anything about this." The statement Jessica held listed names of luxury watches and brand bags. Seeing the 5-digit figure in the amount column, I was in disbelief. Indeed, Mr. Michael Smith himself and his parents are valued customers with an external sales card contract. However, with such a high amount, we needed to confirm just to be sure. My husband is the famous allergist, Michael Smith. As the wife of the clinic's director, using one or two external sales cards is nothing. Is that so? Also, there's something else I personally wanted to verify. John paused before continuing. About 5 years ago, we had complaints about a customer flaunting their external sales card and making extremely unpleasant remarks. Do you know anything about this? What's that? What does it matter? Since we had several complaints, I checked with the staff who were nearby at the time. The content of the conversation was so terrible that the staff remembered it clearly. Glancing sideways, I saw Jessica's expression harden. The staff said the conversation was about stealing someone's husband, who happens to be her brother-in-law. Could it be? Yes, that's right. And she bragged about using a fake pregnancy to break them up, laughing loudly. She talked about how she lied about miscarrying like it was some kind of heroic tale. That's when I realized that time. Jessica's claim of being pregnant with a boy, the hair, was all a lie to snatch Michael. Of course, there was no pregnancy, so no morning sickness or changes in her body shape. What are you saying? That story was about me. Matching the complaints with the external sales card, your name, Jessica Smith, came up. I can't believe this. You are marrying into a doctor's family, becoming the clinic director's wife. I couldn't stand it. I had to do whatever it took to tell Michael that I was the right one for him. I was overwhelmed with disbelief that Michael had fallen for Jessica's scheme, and she had lied to marry him. While I was stunned, the door opened. What's this all about? Explain yourself, Jessica. Since when have you been here? From the beginning. I came back to get something I forgot and found the external sales card statement. And now I hear the pregnancy 5 years ago was all a lie. You trapped me. Michael shouted, and Jessica began to laugh. So what? You got a beautiful wife, and we have a child now. So it's fine, right? Don't joke with me. I can't live with a liar like you. Let's get a divorce. You can't be serious. What about our child? Don't you feel sorry for them? Pushing her away, Michael glared at Jessica with a furious expression. I can't live with a liar and reckless spender like you. It's not good for the child either. We're getting a divorce. I'm taking custody. Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea what I went through to give birth to this child? This child needs to become a doctor in the future to support us. You're just thinking about yourself. There's no point in talking about this now. Let's handle the rest through a lawyer. The relatives who came along hoping to get some effective medicine from the famous allergist were frozen in shock at this chaotic scene. I was so embarrassed to admit that she was my sister. Afterward, Michael got a good lawyer specializing in divorce and successfully got divorced and won custody. Meanwhile, Jessica, who had been shopping to her heart's content on credit using the external sales card during her marriage, was now being chased for repayments. Hey, if your husband hadn't brought that statement, I'd still be the clinic director's wife. I'm being hounded for repayments now. Help your sister out in a pinch, would you? Why should I? You brought this on yourself, didn't you? And you should pay for your own shopping. Unexpectedly, I got a message from Michael via social media. Hey, can we start over? If Jessica hadn't lied about having a boy 5 years ago, we would have been fine as a couple. I want to see our daughter too. I had forgotten how you left me suffering with morning sickness and mocked me, then cheated on me. After 5 years of no contact, the last thing I wanted was to see his face again. Michael seemed to be struggling to keep the clinic he inherited from his father running. But you can't stop gossip due to the infidelity rumors. Patients stopped coming. The Smith Clinic, which Michael inherited, had a 1-star rating and unbelievable bad reviews on a hospital review site. It seemed only a matter of time before he would have to close the clinic he was so fixated on inheriting. Ironically, he was so obsessed with having a male heir. My husband, daughter, and I continue to live happily as a family. Naomi, are you ready? Shall we head out soon? Yes, I was just remembering how delicious the spaghetti you brought me from that restaurant was back when I was a single mother. Jen used to order from a restaurant for takeout as a way to approach me. Back then, my daughter was small. And since we weren't dating, we never ate at the restaurant, just as colleagues. You had just gotten divorced and were having a hard time, right? I thought even a little bit of delicious food could bring you happiness. It was your kindness that drew me to you, the dish that brought us together back then. It was just my daughter and me eating takeout, but now it's different. I'm happy that we can eat together as a family. Who would have thought that a day like this, going out with you and our daughter, would come?
The last photo I have of my father and me together sits on my desk at Martinez Construction. It was taken 3 years ago, just weeks before his heart attack. We're both wearing hard hats, standing in front of our biggest project yet, the Martinez Tower downtown. Dad's smiling proudly, his arm around my shoulders. He built this company from nothing, and I was supposed to help carry on his legacy. At least that's what I thought. Michael. My sister Elena's voice cut through my memories like a knife. I need you in the conference room. Now. I looked up from the project proposals I'd been reviewing. Elena stood in my office doorway, immaculate in her designer suit, not a strand of her dark hair out of place. Behind her stood Tom Wilson, our HR director, looking uncomfortable. Something in their expressions made my stomach drop. Can it wait? I asked, gesturing to the papers spread across my desk. I'm finalizing the bid for the Riverside development. No, Elena said coldly. It can't. The walk to the conference room felt like a march to execution. Every employee we passed quickly looked away, some hurrying in the opposite direction. They knew something I didn't. The conference room, Dad's old conference room, had changed since Elena took over as CEO 6 months ago. Gone were the construction site photos Dad had loved, replaced by modern art and motivational posters. Elena took her seat at the head of the table, Dad's old chair, while Tom sat beside her. Sit, she commanded, pointing to the chair across from them. I remained standing. What's this about, Elena? She slid a folder across the table. Your termination papers. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You're being terminated from Martinez Construction, effective immediately. Her voice was calm, practiced. She'd been planning this. Tom will oversee your departure process. You can't fire me. I'm part honor. Actually, she cut in, you're not. Dad left controlling interest to me, remember? You're just an employee who's been undermining my authority since day one. I stared at my sister, the stranger wearing Prada and ice. Where was the Elena who used to help me build sandcastles? Who cried when I went off to college? Who hugged me at Dad's funeral? Undermining your authority? I repeated. By what? Doing my job. Managing projects like Dad taught me. By going behind my back to the board. She slammed her hand on the table. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little presentation? Trying to convince them my modernization plans are too aggressive. Ah, so that's what this was about. The board asked for my professional opinion. I said quietly, and I gave it. Your plan to sell off our equipment division and outsource labor will destroy everything Dad built. Dad's methods are outdated. This company needs to evolve. This company needs to remember what it stands for. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. Dad believed in quality work, fair wages, and treating our employees like family. Dad is dead. Elena's voice cracked slightly. She took a breath, composing herself. And he left me in charge. Not you. The golden boy who always had his ear, who he took to every job site, She trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words. Who he loved more. Elena. I tried again, softening my voice. This isn't about Dad's favoritism. This is about. Sign the papers, she interrupted, or I'll have security escort you out. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a moment to. No. Elena's tone left no room for discussion. He has 1 hour to clean out his office. After that, he's trespassing. I looked at the termination papers, then at my sister. In her face, I saw years of resentment, of feeling second best, of trying to prove herself. But I also saw something else. Fear. She was afraid of something. Fine, I said, picking up the pen. I'll sign. Relief flickered across her face. Good, Tom will. On one condition. I met her eyes. I want an hour alone in Dad's old office. No supervision, no security cameras. One last time. She frowned. Why? To say goodbye properly, You can have someone search me before I leave if you're worried I'll steal something. Elena studied me for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. 1 hour. Starting now. Dad's office. Elena's office now was on the top floor of our headquarters. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave, though she tried to cover it with some designer room fragrance. The old leather couch where I used to nap as a kid was gone, replaced by a sleek modern settee. His collection of hard hats from various projects had vanished from the shelves, but the painting was still there. It was a simple landscape, rolling hills, a construction site in the distance, a sunset sky. Dad had bought it at a street fair 20 years ago, saying something about it capturing the beauty of building. Elena had kept it, probably because it matched her new color scheme. Only Dad and I knew about the safe behind it. I waited 5 minutes in case Elena was watching through the security cameras she claimed would be off. Then I carefully lifted the painting from its hooks. The wall safe looked exactly as I remembered, old-fashioned with a combination dial. Dad had shown it to me a month before his death. "Remember these numbers, son," he'd said, turning the dial. 7 to 2483. Elena's birthday. Because no matter what happens, she's still your sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. The safe clicked open softly. Inside wasn't the cash or valuables Elena might have expected. Instead, there was a single USB drive and a letter addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. "Dear Michael, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Elena has made her move against you. I know my daughter, her ambition, her pain, and her secrets. What's on this drive will change everything. But before you use it, remember, she's your sister. Whatever you decide to do with this information, do it with mercy. I'm sorry I'm not there to fix this myself. Know that I'm proud of you, son, not just for what you build, but for who you are. Love, Dad." I plugged the USB drive into Elena's computer, my heart pounding. As files began loading on the screen, my breath caught. Emails, bank transfers, secret meetings. "Oh, Elena," I whispered. "What have you done?" I spent the next 40 minutes reading, copying, documenting. When security arrived to escort me out, I was ready. The USB drive was secure in my pocket, its contents backed up to my private cloud. Elena watched from her office doorway as I carried my box of belongings to the elevator. "I hope you understand," she called out. "It's just business." I stepped into the elevator, turned to face her. "See you Monday, sis." Her perfectly maintained eyebrows drew together. "What? Oh, didn't I mention?" I smiled slightly as the doors began to close. "I'm having breakfast with the board of directors on Monday. I think you'll find my presentation very interesting." The last thing I saw was Elena's face draining of color as she finally realized I found the safe. Dad's last gift to me wasn't the USB drive or even the evidence it contained. It was a choice between revenge and redemption, between destroying my sister and saving her from herself. As I drove home that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky the same colors as Dad's old painting, I thought about his words. Do it with mercy. Monday would change everything. The question was, how would I use that change? Part 2. Legacy of Truth. I spent the weekend in my home office, poring over the contents of Dad's USB drive. With each file, each email, each hidden document, the picture became clearer and darker. Elena hadn't just been planning to modernize Martinez construction. She'd been systematically dismantling everything our father had built, piece by piece. The equipment division she wanted to sell off. She'd already signed a preliminary agreement with Global Tech Industries at a fraction of its worth. The outsourcing plan, a scheme to fire our longtime employees and replace them with cheaper labor through a company she secretly owned. But that wasn't the worst of it. "Jesus, Elena," I muttered, staring at my screen late Sunday night. "What were you thinking?" There in black and white were emails proving she'd been artificially inflating project costs, pocketing the difference through a network of shell companies. She'd been stealing from our own company, from our father's legacy, for months before his death. My phone buzzed, Elena's third attempt to call me that day. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I opened the last file on the drive, a video. Dad's face filled my screen, recorded in his office just weeks before his death. "Michael," he began, looking tired but resolute. "If you're watching this, then you've discovered what Elena's been doing. I found out about the embezzlement 2 months ago. When I confronted her, he paused, rubbing his face. She blamed me, said I'd always favored you, always made her feel second best. That she had to prove herself. Son, maybe she was right. Maybe I did favor you, not because I loved her less, but because you reminded me so much of myself at your age. Tears stung my eyes as I watched my father's confession. I planned to handle this quietly, get her help, find a way to make it right. But if you're seeing this, I didn't get the chance. The choice of what to do now falls to you. The video ended. I sat back, memories flooding in. Elena at 5 following me around construction sites with her toy hard hat. At 12, winning the math competition she'd studied months for. At 18, choosing business school instead of engineering, trying to forge her own path. My sister. My responsibility now. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I parked my truck in the Martinez construction lot one last time, noting Elena's Porsche already in its reserved spot. She'd been here early, probably trying to figure out what I found, what I planned to do. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:30, finding Elena pacing outside the conference room. Michael, she called out, her composure cracking slightly. We need to talk. Yes, I agreed. We do. Her office still smelled of Dad's aftershave and her designer fragrance, an odd combination that seemed to fit the moment. She closed the door behind us. Whatever you think you found, she began, whatever you're planning to tell the board. Sit down, Elena. To my surprise, she did. For a moment, I saw past the power suit and perfect makeup to the little girl who used to build sandcastles with me. I connected my laptop to her office TV, started playing the files. Emails appeared. Bank statements. The video of Dad. Elena's face went from pale to ashen as she watched our father's last message. When it ended, she sat in silence for a long moment. I never meant, she whispered finally. It started small. Just a little extra padding on the bids. Then the shell companies seemed so easy. Nobody was getting hurt. Nobody getting hurt. I pulled up the employee list she'd marked for termination. These people have families, Elena. Mortgages. Kids in college. Dad treated them like family because they are family. You don't understand. She stood up, anger and fear warring in her voice. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Perfect Michael, Dad's chosen one. I had to prove I could do more, be more. By stealing, by destroying what he built, by making it better, more efficient, more profitable, more soulless, I cut in. This company isn't just about profits, Elena. It's about building things that last. It's about trust. She sank back into her chair. So that's it? You'll show this to the board. Have me arrested. Take everything. I looked at my watch, 8:55 a.m. The board would be gathering now. No, I said quietly. Her head snapped up. What? I pulled out a thick folder, not the evidence from the USB drive, but something else I'd spent the weekend preparing. This is a new company structure, I explained, sliding it across the desk. You and I as equal partners. A new board of directors that includes some of our longest-serving employees, profit sharing for the workers, and a mandatory ethics oversight committee. She stared at the folder. I don't understand. It's called mercy, Elena. Dad's last lesson to both of us. I leaned forward. You'll step down as CEO, take a position as Chief Strategy Officer instead. I'll handle operations. Together, we'll build something better than either of us could alone. And if I refuse? I gestured to my laptop where Dad's video was frozen on his tired face. Then I'll show the board everything. But I don't think you will refuse, because despite everything, you're still a builder at heart. And builders don't destroy, they create. Tears slipped down her cheeks, smearing her perfect makeup. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove yourself. I know. I stood up, walked around the desk, and did something I hadn't done in years. I hugged my sister. So prove yourself now. Help me make this right. She clung to me for a moment, then straightened up, wiping her eyes. The board's waiting. Yes, they are. Ready to build something new. The board meeting that morning wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of exposures and accusations, they heard our joint vision for Martinez Construction's future. Elena, her voice steady despite her red eyes, presented the new ethics policies she would oversee. I outlined our plans for sustainable growth that maintained our father's values. One by one, The board members nodded their approval. They'd known our father, understood what he'd built went beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Afterward, as employees gathered for the announcement of the new structure, I caught Elena looking at Dad's old painting. I wanted to take it down, she admitted. It reminded me too much of him. A feeling like I was never enough. I touched the frame gently. Maybe we keep it up. As a reminder. Of what? That the most important things are often hidden from view. Like safes behind paintings, or love behind high expectations. She managed a small smile. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. 2 of them, actually. Over the next year, Martinez Construction transformed. Not into the soulless corporation Elena had envisioned or the unchanged monument to the past I'd wanted to preserve, but something new, something better. The equipment division modernized but stayed in-house. Employees got profit sharing and seats on the board. Elena's financial skills, once used for deception, now drove legitimate growth and innovation. Dad's painting still hangs in what is now our shared office. Sometimes late at night when I'm working late, I swear I can smell his aftershave, feel his presence. You did good, son, I imagine him saying. Both of you did good. The safe behind the painting is empty now. We don't need it anymore. The real treasures, trust, forgiveness, family, aren't things you can lock away. Elena and I still disagree sometimes. She pushes for faster growth. I argue for caution. But now we talk, really talk, about the fears and hurts behind our positions. We're learning to be siblings again, partners in preserving and growing our father's legacy. Last week, we broke ground on a new project, affordable housing for veterans. Elena's idea, backed by my construction expertise. As we stood there in our hard hats, I caught her smiling at the workers, greeting them by name, asking about their families. What? She demanded, catching my grin. Nothing, I said. Just thinking Dad would be proud. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunrise paint the sky the same colors as his old painting. Of both of us, she said finally. Yeah, I agreed. Of both of us. The last photo I have of my father still sits on my desk, but next to it now is a new one. Elena and me at the Veterans Housing groundbreaking, both in hard hats, both smiling. Building something new. Together. Sometimes the greatest buildings aren't made of steel and concrete. Sometimes they're built with forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. Dad taught us how to build structures that would stand the test of time. But his last lesson, hidden in that old safe, taught us how to build something even more lasting. A bridge back to each other. The last photo I have of my father and me together sits on my desk at Martinez Construction. It was taken 3 years ago, just weeks before his heart attack. We're both wearing hard hats, standing in front of our biggest project yet. The Martinez Tower downtown. Dad's smiling proudly, his arm around my shoulders. He built this company from nothing, and I was supposed to help carry on his legacy. At least that's what I thought. Michael. My sister Elena's voice cut through my memories like a knife. I need you in the conference room. Now. I looked up from the project proposals I'd been reviewing. Elena stood in my office doorway, immaculate in her designer suit, not a strand of her dark hair out of place. Behind her stood Tom Wilson, our HR director, looking uncomfortable. Something in their expressions made my stomach drop. Can it wait? I asked, gesturing to the papers spread across my desk. I'm finalizing the bid for the Riverside development. No, Elena said coldly. It can't. The walk to the conference room felt like a march to execution. Every employee we passed quickly looked away, some hurrying in the opposite direction. They knew something I didn't. The conference room, Dad's old conference room, had changed since Elena took over as CEO 6 months ago. Gone were the construction site photos Dad had loved, replaced by modern art and motivational posters. Elena took her seat at the head of the table, Dad's old chair, while Tom sat beside her. Sit, she commanded, pointing to the chair across from them. I remained standing. What's this about, Elena? She slid a folder across the table. Your termination papers. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You're being terminated from Martinez Construction, effective immediately. Her voice was calm, practiced. She'd been planning this. Tom will oversee your departure process. You can't fire me. I'm part honor. Actually, she cut in, you're not. Dad left controlling interest to me, remember? You're just an employee. An employee who's been undermining my authority since day one. I stared at my sister, the stranger wearing Prada and ice. Where was the Elena who used to help me build sandcastles? Who cried when I went off to college? Who hugged me at Dad's funeral? Undermining your authority? I repeated. By what? Doing my job. Managing projects like Dad taught me. By going behind my back to the board. She slammed her hand on the table. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little presentation? Trying to convince them my modernization plans are too aggressive. Ah, so that's what this was about. The board asked for my professional opinion. I said quietly, and I gave it. Your plan to sell off our equipment division and outsource labor will destroy everything Dad built. Dad's methods are outdated. This company needs to evolve. This company needs to remember what it stands for. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. Dad believed in quality work, fair wages, and treating our employees like family. Dad is dead. Elena's voice cracked slightly. She took a breath, composing herself. And he left me in charge. Not you. The golden boy who always had his ear, who he took to every job site, She trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words. Who we loved more. Elena. I tried again, softening my voice. This isn't about Dad's favoritism. This is about. Sign the papers, she interrupted, or I'll have security escort you out. Tom shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should take a moment to. No. Elena's tone left no room for discussion. He has 1 hour to clean out his office. After that, he's trespassing. I looked at the termination papers, then at my sister. In her face, I saw years of resentment, of feeling second best, of trying to prove herself. But I also saw something else. Fear. She was afraid of something. Fine, I said, picking up the pen. I'll sign. Relief flickered across her face. Good, Tom will. On one condition. I met her eyes. I want an hour alone in Dad's old office. No supervision, no security cameras. One last time. She frowned. Why? To say goodbye properly. You can have someone search me before I leave if you're worried I'll steal something. Elena studied me for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. 1 hour. Starting now. Dad's office. Elena's office now was on the top floor of our headquarters. It still smelled faintly of his aftershave, though she tried to cover it with some designer room fragrance. The old leather couch where I used to nap as a kid was gone, replaced by a sleek modern settee. His collection of hard hats from various projects had vanished from the shelves, but the painting was still there. It was a simple landscape, rolling hills, a construction site in the distance, a sunset sky. Dad had bought it at a street fair 20 years ago, saying something about it capturing the beauty of building. Elena had kept it. Probably because it matched her new color scheme. Only Dad and I knew about the safe behind it. I waited 5 minutes in case Elena was watching through the security cameras she claimed would be off. Then I carefully lifted the painting from its hooks. The wall safe looked exactly as I remembered, old-fashioned with a combination dial. Dad had shown it to me a month before his death. Remember these numbers, son, he'd said, turning the dial. 7 to 2483. Elena's birthday. Because no matter what happens, she's still your sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. The safe clicked open softly. Inside wasn't the cash or valuables Elena might have expected. Instead, there was a single USB drive and a letter addressed to me in Dad's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Dear Michael, if you're reading this, then what I feared has happened. Elena has made her move against you. I know my daughter, her ambition, her pain, and her secrets. What's on this drive will change everything. But before you use it, remember, she's your sister. Whatever you decide to do with this information, do it with mercy. I'm sorry I'm not there to fix this myself. Know that I'm proud of you, son. Not just for what you build, but for who you are. Love, Dad. I plugged the USB drive into Elena's computer, my heart pounding. As files began loading on the screen, my breath caught. Emails, bank transfers, secret meetings. Oh, Elena, I whispered. What have you done? I spent the next 40 minutes reading, copying, documenting. When security arrived to escort me out, I was ready. The USB drive was secure in my pocket, its contents backed up to my private cloud. Elena watched from her office doorway as I carried my box of belongings to the elevator. I hope you understand, she called out. It's just business. I stepped into the elevator, turned to face her. See you Monday, sis. Her perfectly maintained eyebrows drew together. What? Oh, didn't I mention? I smiled slightly as the doors began to close. I'm having breakfast with the board of directors on Monday. I think I'll find my presentation very interesting. The last thing I saw was Elena's face draining of color as she finally realized I'd found the safe. Dad's last gift to me wasn't the USB drive or even the evidence it contained. It was a choice between revenge and redemption, between destroying my sister and saving her from herself. As I drove home that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky the same colors as Dad's old painting, I thought about his words. Do it with mercy. Monday would change everything. The question was, how would I use that change? Part 2. Legacy of Truth. I spent the weekend in my home office, poring over the contents of Dad's USB drive. With each file, each email, each hidden document, the picture became clearer and darker. Elena hadn't just been planning to modernize Martinez construction. She'd been systematically dismantling everything our father had built, piece by piece. The equipment division she wanted to sell off. She'd already signed a preliminary agreement with Global Tech Industries at a fraction of its worth. The outsourcing plan, a scheme to fire our longtime employees and replace them with cheaper labor through a company she secretly owned. But that wasn't the worst of it. Jesus, Elena, I muttered, staring at my screen late Sunday night. What were you thinking? There in black and white were emails proving she'd been artificially inflating project costs, pocketing the difference through a network of shell companies. She'd been stealing from our own company, from our father's legacy, for months before his death. My phone buzzed, Elena's third attempt to call me that day. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I opened the last file on the drive, a video. Dad's face filled my screen, recorded in his office just weeks before his death. Michael, he began, looking tired but resolute. If you're watching this, then you've discovered what Elena's been doing. I found out about the embezzlement 2 months ago. When I confronted her, he paused, rubbing his face. She blamed me, said I'd always favored you, always made her feel second best. That she had to prove herself. Son, maybe she was right. Maybe I did favor you, not because I loved her less, but because you reminded me so much of myself at your age. Tears stung my eyes as I watched my father's confession. I planned to handle this quietly, get her help, find a way to make it right. But if you're seeing this, I didn't get the chance. The choice of what to do now falls to you. The video ended. I sat back, memories flooding in. Elena at 5 following me around construction sites with her toy hard hat. At 12, winning the math competition she'd studied months for. At 18, choosing business school instead of engineering, trying to forge her own path. My sister. My responsibility now. Monday morning arrived clear and cold. I parked my truck in the Martinez construction lot one last time, noting Elena's Porsche already in its reserved spot. She'd been here early, probably trying to figure out what I found, what I planned to do. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. I arrived at 8:30, finding Elena pacing outside the conference room. Michael, she called out, her composure cracking slightly. We need to talk. Yes, I agreed. We do. Her office still smelled of Dad's aftershave and her designer fragrance, an odd combination that seemed to fit the moment. She closed the door behind us. Whatever you think you found, she began, whatever you're planning to tell the board. Sit down, Elena. To my surprise, she did. For a moment, I saw past the power suit and perfect makeup to the little girl who used to build sandcastles with me. I connected my laptop to her office TV, started playing the files. Emails appeared. Bank statements. The video of Dad. Elena's face went from pale to ashen as she watched our father's last message. When it ended, she sat in silence for a long moment. I never meant, she whispered finally. It started small. Just a little extra padding on the bids. Then the shell companies seemed so easy. Nobody was getting hurt. Nobody getting hurt. I pulled up the employee list she'd marked for termination. These people have families, Elena. Mortgages. Kids in college. Dad treated them like family because they are family. You don't understand. She stood up, anger and fear warring in her voice. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Perfect Michael, Dad's chosen one. I had to prove I could do more, be more. By stealing, by destroying what he built, by making it better, more efficient, more profitable, more soulless. I cut in. This company isn't just about profits, Elena. It's about building things that last. It's about trust. She sank back into her chair. So that's it? You'll show this to the board, have me arrested, take everything. I looked at my watch, 8:55 a.m. The board would be gathering now. No, I said quietly. Her head snapped up. What? I pulled out a thick folder, not the evidence from the USB drive, but something else I'd spent the weekend preparing. This is a new company structure, I explained, sliding it across the desk. You and I as equal partners. A new board of directors that includes some of our longest-serving employees, profit sharing for the workers, and a mandatory ethics oversight committee. She stared at the folder. I don't understand. It's called mercy, Elena. Dad's last lesson to both of us. I leaned forward. You'll step down as CEO, take a position as Chief Strategy Officer instead. I'll handle operations. Together, we'll build something better than either of us could alone. And if I refuse? I gestured to my laptop where Dad's video was frozen on his tired face. Then I'll show the board everything. But I don't think you will refuse, because despite everything, you're still a builder at heart. And builders don't destroy, they create. Tears slipped down her cheeks, smearing her perfect makeup. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to prove yourself. I know. I stood up, walked around the desk, and did something I hadn't done in years. I hugged my sister. So prove yourself now. Help me make this right. She clung to me for a moment, then straightened up, wiping her eyes. The board's waiting. Yes, they are, ready to build something new. The board meeting that morning wasn't what anyone expected. Instead of exposures and accusations, they heard our joint vision for Martinez Construction's future. Elena, her voice steady despite her red eyes, presented the new ethics policies she would oversee. I outlined our plans for sustainable growth that maintained our father's values. One by one, the board members nodded their approval. They'd known our father, understood what he'd built went beyond balance sheets and profit margins. Afterward, as employees gathered for the announcement of the new structure, I caught Elena looking at Dad's old painting. I wanted to take it down, she admitted. It reminded me too much of him. A feeling like I was never enough. I touched the frame gently. Maybe we keep it up. As a reminder. Of what? That the most important things are often hidden from view. Like safes behind paintings, or love behind high expectations. She managed a small smile. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. 2 of them, actually. Over the next year, Martinez Construction transformed. Not into the soulless corporation Elena had envisioned or the unchanged monument to the past I'd wanted to preserve, but something new, something better. The equipment division modernized but stayed in-house. Employees got profit sharing and seats on the board. Elena's financial skills, once used for deception, now drove legitimate growth and innovation. Dad's painting still hangs in what is now our shared office. Sometimes late at night when I'm working late, I swear I can smell his aftershave, feel his presence. You did good, son, I imagine him saying. Both of you did good. The safe behind the painting is empty now. We don't need it anymore. The real treasures, trust, forgiveness, family, aren't things you can lock away. Elena and I still disagree sometimes. She pushes for faster growth. I argue for caution. But now we talk, really talk, about the fears and hurts behind our positions. We're learning to be siblings again, partners in preserving and growing our father's legacy. Last week, we broke ground on a new project, affordable housing for veterans. Elena's idea, backed by my construction expertise. As we stood there in our hard hats, I caught her smiling at the workers, greeting them by name, asking about their families. What? She demanded, catching my grin. Nothing, I said, just thinking Dad would be proud. She was quiet for a moment, watching the sunrise paint the sky the same colors as his old painting. Of both of us, she said finally. Yeah, I agreed. Of both of us. The last photo I have of my father still sits on my desk, but next to it now is a new one. Elena and me at the Veterans Housing groundbreaking, both in hard hats, both smiling. Building something new. Together. Sometimes the greatest buildings aren't made of steel and concrete. Sometimes they're built with forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. Dad taught us how to build structures that would stand the test of time. But his last lesson, hidden in that old safe, taught us how to build something even more lasting, a bridge back to each other.
I am Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. Regret filled me as I wished I could have shown him his grandchildren. The words escaped my lips along with a sigh. I got married 5 years ago, at the age of 25. At my wedding, my father and I made a promise. I'll let you know first when I get pregnant. However, that promise remained unfulfilled, and it became my only regret about my father. His illness was discovered a year ago, and since then, I did everything I could for him. I regularly returned to my parents' home, visited the hospital with my mother, and increased the frequency of phone calls and video chats. Despite my efforts, I couldn't help but wonder if I could have done more. As I muttered these thoughts, my mother, sitting next to me, reassured me, saying, "You did well, Chelsea. Your father would be satisfied." Just then, my sister Portia returned, bringing the lawyer with her. My sister entered the living room, accompanied by a man in his mid-40s, whom I assumed was the lawyer. He handed me his business card, introducing himself as Samuel, the attorney. Gratefully, I acknowledged his presence, and my mother guided him to his seat. As soon as the lawyer sat down, my sister blurted out, "I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance." I quickly clarified, "It's not all for you, Portia." An uneasy tension filled the room as my sister glared at me, revealing our strained relationship. We used to be okay, but things soured when we found out about Dad's illness. Despite my attempts to bridge the gap, my sister's arrogant attitude and reluctance to visit our father only worsened our relationship. I expressed my frustration, but she insisted, "I'm not being stubborn. I live in the city, and it's not easy to come to the countryside." Our argument continued, and I realized that our relationship had deteriorated quickly. Even though she lived far away, I believed she could have visited once in a while. In the end, she stopped talking, and the tension hung in the air. Attempting to defuse the situation, the lawyer intervened, saying, "Let's calm down, please." I apologized, and the lawyer nodded before continuing. "As I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will." My mother inquired, "When did this happen?" The lawyer replied, "A few weeks before he passed away." He contacted me, so I went to the hospital to have him sign the will in front of me, with his primary physician present. It turned out they had arranged for the primary physician to contact the lawyer. After my father passed away, the lawyer was contacted. He, in turn, reached out to us, explaining the circumstances. "That's how we find ourselves here today," the lawyer said, producing a white envelope and placing it in front of us. Inspecting the envelope, I mumbled, "This is definitely Dad's handwriting." My sister Portia seemed impatient, saying, "Never mind, just tell us what's in it. I'm busy, you know." The lawyer, with a wry smile, opened the envelope to reveal a single piece of paper. "This is what was written there," he began, explaining that besides the house and land, our father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. The mention of the storage shed puzzled me. My sister, however, interrupted angrily. "Wait a minute. You didn't mention the farm." "The farm, yes," I added, recalling that it was a hobby my father took up after closing his company. He had started farming near our home until he fell ill. My sister insisted that the farm should be part of the inheritance. Reviewing the documents, the lawyer found a note and revealed, "The farm is rented land." Disappointed, my sister thought we owned it, but I silently considered it might be for the best since we knew little about farming. The conversation shifted to dividing the inheritance. "The house and land go to the wife," the lawyer declared. My sister was content, but the lawyer suggested dividing the rest as we pleased. My sister promptly claimed the cash from the savings, approximately $100,000. Protesting against this selfish arrangement, I objected. "Wait a minute. I'm the oldest daughter. That's irrelevant. I'll take the storage shed." My sister turned to the lawyer, asking, "What even is that?" The lawyer explained, It's the storage shed next to the house. You'll inherit the building, the land, and its contents. My sister's eyes lit up, and she eagerly accepted. As I questioned her motives, the lawyer continued, "It's about 65 square feet, roughly the size of a small bedroom." Reacting with distaste, my sister grimaced as the lawyer placed photos of the shed on the table. The exterior looked run down, and the interior contained only basic tools, nothing valuable. My sister declared, "I don't want it." I took the photos and painted them myself. It was all quite ordinary. Though these are sentimental items, they won't fetch much money, I thought. As I pondered, my sister spoke up, saying, "Fine, I'll take the cash. You can have that dirty shed." "Hold on, that's not fair. You agreed to the vegetable farming. What are you complaining about now?" my sister retorted. It was difficult to argue against her point, but if I didn't speak up, she'd take all of Dad's inheritance. My sister pressed me, asking, "So we're good then?" Struggling to answer, my mother chimed in, "As long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections." My sister grinned, and it seemed settled. However, feeling uneasy, I immediately objected, saying, "Well, I'm not satisfied." "Give it up. You're so greedy, aren't you?" my sister remarked, calling me a hassle. Frustrated, I insisted, "That's not it. You care more about Dad than money, right?" Her words left me speechless, realizing that family is more important than money. Before I could say more, my sister ended the conversation. In the end, my mother got the house and land. My sister received Dad's savings, and all that was left for me was the dirty shed. My sister signed a document promising not to complain about the inheritance division, laughing loudly. Full of complaints, I couldn't help but vent to my mother, asking, "Mom, why didn't you help me?" She replied, "I did help you. You decided with Portia." I argued, "That's not true. I made sure you got the shed." My mother assured me, "You might find something surprisingly good if you look closely." The next day, armed with the key from the lawyer, I headed to the shed near the field, a 10-minute walk from home. It was a rural road where no one else passed by. Upon reaching the field, which my father had rented for the past year, I opened the dusty shed with the key. As I looked around, there was nothing special inside, just tools for farming. Disappointed, I mumbled, "Maybe I should just take what's inside for now." However, upon closer inspection, I noticed that the shed felt smaller from the inside than it appeared from the outside. Puzzled, I walked around to the back and discovered another door. Gasping, I realized there was a space accessible only from the back. Excited, I thought this must be Dad's surprise. Remembering his love for surprises, I began tearing up. Rummaging through the shed, I found 2 keys hidden in the handle of a shovel. Trying one in the back door, it clicked open. Inside the cramped space, a large safe stood alone. Recognizing it from Dad's company, I hugged the safe, feeling fulfilled. Thinking that there had to be more surprises, I inserted the second key into the safe. With a slightly rusty sound, the safe opened, revealing contents that left me in disbelief. I was stunned. Inside was an unexpected inheritance. Overwhelmed with thoughts, I realized I had to tell Mom. Locking the safe, I rushed to her and, after explaining the situation, called my husband. Together, we moved the safe from my parents' house. However, a realization hit me. The contents were undoubtedly Dad's. If it's part of my inheritance, including the shed, I might have to pay inheritance tax. Better get this thoroughly checked out. The valuable contents warranted consultation with the lawyer about inheritance tax. According to the lawyer, consulting a certified public accountant was advised. A friend referred me to an accountant, and I left the complicated matters in their capable hands. A year passed in this way, and just when I thought things had settled down, my sister showed up near my home. "What brings you here all of a sudden?" I asked. "Well, I had some business at our parents' house, so I stopped by." "Something like that," my sister replied. Her behavior struck me as odd. Despite the proximity of our homes, we weren't the kind of sisters who would casually visit, especially after the tension over Dad's inheritance. Suspicion lingered as I looked at her. Acting a bit nervous, my sister asked, "Can I come in?" I agreed, but her visit was unusual. After serving coffee, she started fidgeting and finally spoke. "So, did you win the lottery or something?" I shook my head in confusion. "No, I didn't." "Did your husband get a bonus?" I replied, "I never buy lottery tickets, and my husband's bonus isn't due now." "What are you talking about?" Angrily, she exclaimed. "What are you making fun of me for?" "Money, you had it, don't you?" She excitedly shared a story from a few days ago when she ran into our aunt in the city. The aunt mentioned receiving a $500 gift card as a thank you for visiting Dad. My sister assumed I sent it and believed I had come into extra money. She interrogated me, insisting that I admit to a windfall. Sighing, I clarified. It was a thank you gift from the inheritance. My sister didn't like my attitude and accused me of mocking her. I explained, no, it was a genuine thank you gift, but she pressed, demanding to know where I got the money. I replied, from the inheritance, remember? So I sent thank you gifts to relatives who had helped us. Upon hearing this, my sister frowned and remarked, "All you got was that dirty shed." I nodded, confirming her statement, but then added, "There was a safe inside it. That's where the real inheritance was." Perplexed, my sister questioned, "A safe? Real inheritance?" I carefully explained to her about the watches in the safe, all of them valuable and collected by our father as a hobby during his lifetime. However, I admitted not knowing their exact value. On the other hand, the remaining savings were about $100,000, which seemed small considering our father's background as a business owner who could retire early. This led me to believe he might have invested a significant amount in those watches. My mother, upon seeing the contents of the safe, had expressed concern about potential inheritance tax. Seeking guidance, I asked her, "What should I do, Mom?" After some thought, she advised, "Things like this always come out. You should declare it properly. Let's ask that lawyer we spoke to recently." I consulted the lawyer again, who explained that if you inherit valuables, the inheritance tax is determined by their value at that time. He also suggested that a certified public accountant could handle it for me. Following this advice, I left it to the accountant. The results revealed that the watches alone were worth at least $500,000. Faced with this valuation, I questioned, "How should I pay the inheritance tax?" The accountant suggested, "How about keeping the ones you're emotionally attached to and selling the rest?" Agreeing with the practicality of this approach, I sold some watches, used the money to pay the inheritance tax, and sent thank you gifts to the helpful relatives, the gift cards my sister had mentioned. By the way, I kept items like the pocket watch my father often wore, which held the most memories for me. I showed it to my sister while explaining the story, saying, "This one isn't expensive, but it holds the most memories for me." However, my sister frowned upon hearing my story. "What? You don't have any left?" she asked. I replied, "No, there are still some in the safe, which is at Mom's. It's too big for this house. It's the one Dad used at his company." My sister looked away, seeming deep in thought. Feeling uneasy, I anticipated her reaction, but she surprised me by standing up and saying, "I'm leaving now that I know where the money came from," and left. Considering my sister's money-minded nature, I expected her to demand a share of the money from the watch sales. I was relieved she left without making a fuss. However, in my relief, I forgot the unease I had felt earlier, only to be reminded of it late that night when I received a call from my mother. "Chelsea, it's urgent. Come over right away," my mother exclaimed. Alarmed, my husband and I rushed to her house, noticing something strange as we approached. The area around my parents' house was lit up in red, and as we got closer, several police cars were parked outside. "What's going on?" I wondered, and the reason became clear: a distressing situation unfolding at my parents' house. I navigated through the crowd, calling out to my mother, "What happened, Mom?" According to her, it was after 9 p.m., and feeling tired, she had already gone to bed. Shortly afterward, she heard strange noises, Sounds like someone searching for something coming from beyond the door. Oh, it's a burglar, my mother instantly thought. Feeling helpless as she was alone in the house, she decided to escape through the window. Glancing back, she saw the light of a flashlight moving inside the house, confirming her suspicion of a burglar. Convinced, she ran to the neighbor's house and urgently sought help, saying, "There's a burglar." Upon hearing this, the neighbor promptly came out, and they both observed the swinging light my mother pointed at, thinking it was a burglar. They called the police, who arrived soon after. However, it turned out not to be a burglar at all. It was my sister who had sneaked into the house to rummage through the safe. Influenced by my story, neither my mother nor the neighbor knew this. When the police arrived, my sister, realizing she was in trouble, attempted to make a quick escape. In her rush, she accidentally bumped into the open door of the safe, causing it to topple over and fall onto her as she tried to flee. That's how Portia got trapped under the safe, and she was taken to the hospital by ambulance, complaining of leg pain. Stunned, I was truly dumbfounded by the turn of events. Afterward, my mother and I apologized to the police officers for the late-night disturbance. I also called my sister's husband, who expressed disbelief, exclaiming, "Wait, you're saying Portia broke into her own family home and got injured?" "Yes, that's correct," I replied, shocked and disappointed. Her husband revealed that Portia had accumulated a significant amount of debt, spending extravagantly on brand-name items. The couple had a massive fight, leading Portia to storm out, declaring she would borrow from Mom to pay it back. It turned out she had already used the $100,000 she inherited to settle some of her debts. However, still short, she came to me, seeking more money. Learning about the contents of the safe triggered her actions, resulting in this entire mess. No wonder her husband was furious. In the end, my sister, with a fractured leg, was hospitalized, and her husband started talking about divorce. Despite her protests, he brought divorce papers to the hospital, and she had no choice but to sign. Now she lies in her hospital bed, stunned by the unfolding events. I noticed a part-time job magazine next to her, suggesting she's contemplating working part-time to pay off her debts. As for me, I decided to move back to my parents' home amid all the commotion. Concerned about my mother and another significant reason, I found out I'm pregnant. After discussing it with my husband, we decided to move back home and have my mother assist us with childcare. Although I wish I could have shared the news of my pregnancy with my father while he was alive, I'm certain he would be happy for us. So, I'm looking forward to giving birth to a healthy baby. I am Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. Regret lingers within me as I wish I could have shared with him the joy of meeting his grandchildren. These thoughts escaped my lips accompanied by a heavy sigh. I got married 5 years ago at the age of 25, and during the ceremony, my father and I made a pact. I promised to inform him first when I got pregnant. Sadly, that promise remained unfulfilled. My only regret about my father centers around this unkept promise. His illness had been discovered a year ago, and since then, I devoted myself to doing everything I could for him. Regular visits to my parents' home and the hospital with my mother became a routine. I increased the frequency of phone calls and video chats, exhaustively exploring every avenue to support him. Despite my efforts, a lingering doubt persists. Could I have done more? As I mull over these thoughts, my mother, sitting beside me, reassures me, "You did well, Chelsea. Your father would be satisfied." Just then, my sister Portia returns, accompanied by the family lawyer. The mid-40s man hands me his business card, introducing himself as Samuel, the attorney. My mother guides Samuel to a seat, and as soon as he settles in, my sister blurts out, "I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance." I quickly clarify, "It's not all for you, Portia." Her expression sours, and we exchange glares. Our strained relationship, exacerbated by my sister's distant attitude since our father's illness was discovered, hangs heavily in the room. I try to address the tension, stating, "I may have said it wrong, worried about him, but you don't have to be so stubborn." she retorts. I'm not being stubborn. I live in the city. It's not easy to come to the countryside. Our argument reveals deeper issues, and the lawyer intervenes, urging us to calm down. Apologies are exchanged, but the lawyer redirects the focus, stating, as I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will. My mother inquires when this occurred, and Samuel responds, a few weeks before he passed away, he contacted me. The lawyer had visited the hospital, where my father, with his primary physician present, had finalized his will. It had been arranged for the physician to inform the lawyer upon my father's passing. Now, with a white envelope in hand, the lawyer places the will in front of us, confirming, this is the will, undoubtedly in your father's handwriting. I murmured as I verified the characters on the envelope. My sister Portia appeared somewhat irritable, but she dismissed it, saying, never mind, just tell us what's in it. I'm busy. You know that very well, she added, addressing the lawyer with a wry smile. With that, he opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper. The contents outlined that, aside from the house and land, my father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. While we were aware of the house and land, the mention of a storage shed puzzled me. As I contemplated this, my sister, visibly annoyed, interjected, wait a minute. You didn't mention the farm. The lawyer acknowledged the oversight and explained, yes, the farm your dad used to work on as a hobby. He recounted how, after turning 50, my father decided to close his company in the next town and focus on farming near our home. Despite initial objections from my sister, who opposed the decision during her college years, my father persisted, finding joy in the physical activity of farming. Now, my sister insisted that the farm should be part of the inheritance. The lawyer, reviewing the documents, quickly addressed this concern, revealing that the farm was rented land. My sister expressed disappointment, realizing we didn't own the expansive piece of land as she had thought. The conversation then turned to dividing the inheritance. The lawyer suggested giving the house and land to the wife, my mother, leaving the rest to be divided between my sister and me. The savings and storage shed were up for distribution. My sister eagerly claimed the savings, valuing at about $100,000, declaring triumphantly, I'll take the cash. However, I objected, emphasizing my position as the oldest daughter. I proposed that she could have the storage shed, questioning its significance. Despite my objections, my sister was adamant about her claim to the cash. The lawyer clarified that the storage shed was a small building next to the phone, approximately 65 square feet, resembling the size of a small bedroom. He presented photos of the shed, revealing its dilapidated exterior and basic contents, consisting mainly of ordinary tools like hoses, scissors, and shovels. The realization dawned that the shed held little monetary value. I don't want it, my sister grimaced. I painted the photos too. It was all very ordinary. These are sentimental items, but they won't bring in money. As I pondered this, my sister reluctantly agreed, saying, fine, I'll take the cash. You can have that dirty shed. However, I found it unfair. Hold on, that's not fair. You agreed to the vegetable farming. What are you complaining about now? My sister countered, making it difficult to argue. Still, I couldn't let her take all of Dad's inheritance without a fight. My sister pressed me, asking if we were good. My mother chimed in, saying, as long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections. Reluctantly, I nodded, and the division was settled. My sister grinned, and feeling uneasy. I immediately objected, saying, well, I'm not satisfied. Give it up. You're so greedy, my sister retorted. Her words left me speechless, and I couldn't deny that family was more important than money. My sister abruptly ended the conversation, and in the end, my mother got the house and land. My sister got Dad's savings, and all that was left for me was the dirty shed. My sister, laughing loudly, signed a document promising not to complain about the inheritance division. Filled with complaints, I couldn't help but vent to my mother. Mom, why didn't you help me? My mother replied, I did help you. I made sure you got the shed. Unhappy about inheriting the shed, I puffed out my cheeks in response. The next day, armed with the shed key from the lawyer, I headed to the shed near the field, a 10-minute walk from home along a deserted rural road. Finally, reaching the empty field, I opened the dusty shed and began looking around for something sentimental from Dad. Yet, all I found were tools and nothing special. Disheartened, I considered taking what was inside when I noticed something odd. The shed seemed smaller on the inside. Puzzled, I walked around to the back and gasped. There was another door. This second entrance wasn't visible from the inside, creating a mysterious space accessible only from the back. Excitement surged through me as I thought, this must be Dad's surprise. Dad loved surprises. Even on birthdays, memories flooded back and tearing up. I returned inside, searching for the back door key. After finding 2 hidden keys in the handle of a shovel, I tried one in the door at the back. With a click, it opened, revealing a cramped space with a large safe. I wondered, is this from Dad's company? I recognized the safe. It was the same one I saw in the corner of his office when I was a child. Nostalgic, I hugged the safe. This was a true memory of my father, and I felt fulfilled. This alone made the inheritance worthwhile. However, knowing Dad, this couldn't be the end. There had to be more surprises. There's got to be more surprises, I muttered as I inserted the second key into the safe. With a slightly rusty sound, the safe opened. What? No way. The moment I saw the contents, I was stunned. Inside was an unexpected inheritance. Overwhelmed, I locked the safe and rushed to my mother. After explaining the situation to her, I called my husband, and with his help, we moved the safe from my parents' house. Then it hit me, the contents of the safe were undoubtedly Dad's. However, if it's part of my inheritance, including the shed, I might have to pay inheritance tax. Better get this checked out thoroughly, I thought. The valuable contents of the safe prompted me to consult the lawyer. According to him, for inheritance tax matters, it's better to consult a certified public accountant. So I got a referral to an accountant from a friend and left all the complicated matters to them. The year passed in this way, and just when I thought things had finally settled down, my sister showed up near my home. What brings you here all of a sudden? I asked. Well, I had some business at our parents' house, so I stopped by, yeah, something like that. My sister replied, her behavior appearing strange. No matter how you looked at it, even if my home was close to our parents', it was still a 20-minute drive. We weren't the kind of sisters who would casually visit, especially after the tension of our dad's inheritance. I couldn't shake off my suspicion as I looked at her. My sister, acting a bit nervous, asked, "Can I come in?" "Sure, but what's the matter?" I inquired. "I have something to talk about," my sister said, forcing a smile. Reluctantly, I let her into the house. After serving some coffee, she started to fidget, and then began to speak. "So, did you win the lottery or something?" she asked. "What? No, I didn't," I replied. "Then did your husband get a bonus?" she questioned, puzzled. "I never buy lottery tickets because I'm not interested. My husband, who's a salaried worker, does get a holiday bonus, but it's not that time of year," I explained. Confused, I asked her directly, "Hey, what are you talking about?" Suddenly, my sister got angry. "What are you making fun of me?" "No. What are you talking about?" she snapped. "Money. Money, you have it, don't you? Money." My sister spoke excitedly. It was a story from a few days ago. Living in the city, my sister had run into our aunt by chance, and the woman started the conversation like this. "I know how hard it's been for you since you lost your father. Are you doing okay?" "Yes, well, I visited him many times when he was sick. Thank you. But you must be relieved, right? Getting such a big thank you gift." "Thank you gift?" "Yes, your sister sent me a $500 gift card as a thank you for visiting him." What caught my sister's attention was the gift card. Hearing that I had sent it, she was convinced I had come into some extra money. "You got a windfall, didn't you? Just admit it." My sister interrogated me. "Ah, That's what this is about, I sighed. My sister didn't like my attitude and yelled, "What's with that attitude? Are you mocking me?" "No, it was a thank you gift." "So, where'd you get the money for it?" "That's what I want to know." "From the inheritance, remember?" I replied. "So, I sent thank you gifts to relatives who had helped us," I began, and upon hearing this, my sister frowned. "All you got was that dirty shed," she remarked. "Yes, that's true. But you can't sell that for money." However, there was a safe inside it, and that's where the real inheritance was. A safe? A real inheritance? I carefully explained to her about the watches in the safe, all valuable items collected by my father as a hobby during his lifetime. However, I didn't know their exact value. On the other hand, the remaining savings were about $100,000. Considering he was a business owner who could retire early, that amount seemed small, leading me to think he might have invested a lot in those watches. "If they're valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax," my mother had said after seeing the contents of the safe. "What should I do, Mom?" When I asked, my mother thought for a moment and advised, "Things like this always come out. You should declare it properly." "How?" "Well, let's ask that lawyer we spoke to recently." So I consulted the lawyer again, and I was told that if you inherit valuables, the inheritance tax is determined by their value. At that time, I was also told that a certified public accountant could handle it for me. As a result, it was found that the watches alone were worth at least $500,000. With watches this valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax. How should I pay it? I asked. The lawyer suggested, how about keeping the ones you're emotionally attached to and selling the rest? Certainly, it didn't make sense to me, who didn't know the value, to hold on to such expensive watches. I'd rather someone who understands their worth have them. With that thought, I sold some of the watches, used the money from the sale to pay the inheritance tax, and sent thank you gifts to the relatives who had helped us. Those thank you gifts were the gift cards my sister was talking about. By the way, what I kept were items like the pocket watch my father often wore. I showed my sister the pocket watch as I told her this story. This one isn't expensive, but it holds the most memories for me. However, my sister frowned upon hearing my story. "What? You don't have any left?" she questioned. "No, there are still some in the safe." "Where's the safe?" I explained. "It's at Mom's. The safe is too big for this house. It's the one Dad used at his company." My sister looked away, seeming deep in thought. I felt uneasy seeing her like this, but right after that, she stood up and said, "I'm leaving, now that I know where the money came from," and left. Considering how money-minded my sister is, I thought she might demand some of the money from the watch sales. I was relieved she left without making a fuss. However, in my relief, I forgot the unease I had felt earlier. My sister isn't that understanding, and I had forgotten that. I was reminded of this late that night when I got a call from my mother. "Chelsea, it's urgent. Come over right away." "What happened, Mom?" "It's just really bad," my mother said, frantic and unclear. My husband and I rushed to my mother's house, and as we approached, we noticed something strange. The area around my parents' house was lit up in red. "What's going on?" The reason became clear as we got closer. Several police cars were parked outside my parents' house. I navigated through the crowd and called out to my mother. "What happened, Mom?" According to her, it was after 9 p.m., and feeling tired, she had gone to bed already. Soon after, she heard strange noises, sounds like someone searching for something coming from beyond the door. "Oh, it's a burglar," my mother instantly thought. However, she was the only one in the house, feeling helpless. She decided to escape through the window. Looking back, she saw the light of a flashlight moving inside the house. This is definitely a burglar, she was convinced. Running to the neighbor's house, she urgently said, "Help. There's a burglar." Hearing this, the neighbor immediately came out. They too saw the swinging light my mother was pointing at and called the police, thinking it was a burglar. However, it wasn't a burglar at all. It was my sister who had sneaked into the house to rummage through the safe after hearing my story. Neither my mother nor the neighbor had any way of knowing this. Soon, the police arrived, and naturally, my sister was shocked. Realizing she was in trouble, she tried to make a quick escape. Of course, it's her own family home, so there's no need to run. Yet, in her panic, my sister thought she had to escape. In her rush, she bumped into the open door of the safe. Just then, the already unstable safe toppled over, falling right onto her as she tried to flee. So, Portia got trapped under it. Yes, that's what happened. Is she okay? I asked. She was taken to the hospital by ambulance, but she keeps saying her leg hurts. What on earth was she thinking? I was truly dumbfounded. Afterward, my mother and I apologized to the police officers who had come to help, feeling bad for calling so late. I also phoned my sister's husband. Wait, you're saying Portia broke into her own family home and got injured? He questioned. Yes, that's correct. What is Portia doing? She doesn't even do housework. I'm really sorry about my sister. That's it. I'm filing for divorce. Divorce? Actually, according to my sister's husband, she had racked up a considerable amount of debt. Apparently, she had been spending a lot on brand name items, and he had just found out. They had a huge fight, and in the end, my sister stormed out of the house, saying, I'll borrow from Mom and pay it back. Turns out she had already used the $100,000 she inherited to pay off her debts. Still short, she came to me to scrounge for more money. Learning about the contents of the safe led to her actions, which in turn led to this whole mess. No wonder her husband was furious. In the end, my sister, who had fractured her leg, was hospitalized. Her husband came to the hospital and started talking about divorce. Naturally, my sister made a scene. I'm not getting a divorce. Absolutely not. But it was too late. Her husband had brought the divorce papers. Seeing them, she had no choice but to sign. Now she's lying in her hospital bed stunned. There's a part-time job magazine next to her, so she's probably planning to start working part-time to pay off her debts. That would be a relief for me. As for me, I decided to move back to my parents' home after all the commotion. Of course, I'm worried about my mother, but there's another reason. I found out I'm pregnant. My husband and I talked it over and decided to move back home and have my mother help us with the children and childcare. I wish I could have told my father about the pregnancy while he was alive, but I'm sure he would be happy for us. So I'm looking forward to giving birth to a healthy baby. I'm Karen, a 25-year-old employee, and 6 months ago, my grandfather, who raised me, passed away. Today is the day when the lawyer will open my grandfather's will, prompting my visit to his house with my sister Susan. Susan, 4 years older than me, is my only family since our parents passed away in an accident 20 years ago. Raised by our grandparents, we faced the loss of our grandmother to illness a few years ago, and our grandfather's health had been declining ever since. Concerned for him, I chose to live in an apartment near his house, regularly checking on him. You're a grown woman. It's unbecoming to keep coming back home, my grandfather would say cheerfully. But despite his words, I continued my visits. One day, arriving as usual, I discovered my grandfather in pain at the entrance. In a panic, I called an ambulance, but he passed away suddenly. Hey, what are you daydreaming for? At least prepare some tea. My sister Susan's voice brought me back to reality. Right, the lawyer will be here soon, I replied, heading to the kitchen. Glancing at Susan stretching out her legs on the mat and yawning, I could still smell her strong perfume from a distance. She's the same as always, I murmured as I placed the kettle on the stove. My sister had always been self-centered, dyeing her hair in her teens and hanging out with delinquents. She demanded money without working, causing trouble that our grandparents had to apologize for, leaving me to deal with the fallout as the quiet one. Even as an adult with no stable job, she drifted around, working part-time. I knew she had been asking our grandfather for money in my absence, finding the situation troublesome. If it weren't for the inheritance, I thought, interrupted by Susan's formal greeting to the arriving lawyer. Ah, you must be the lawyer. Thanks for coming today, she said in her high-pitched voice. Rushing to join them, I thanked the lawyer for his presence, recalling his kind eyes that mirrored my grandfather's. The lawyer's badge gleamed brightly on his chest as we began the process after offering incense in front of my grandfather's portrait. He took a sip of the tea, marking the beginning of a significant and uncertain chapter in our lives. I retrieved my grandfather's will, a document entrusted to him while he was still alive. Its contents revealed that my elder sister Susan was to inherit $20 million in cash, while I, the younger daughter, would inherit the house and the land it stood on. Upon hearing this, Susan burst into laughter, finding it amusing that she was to receive a substantial sum while I, the younger and supposedly plainer sister, would only inherit an old house. "It's just right for someone as plain as you," she remarked snidely. I retorted, pointing out that it wasn't just the house but also the land. She dismissed the value of the land in such a seemingly undesirable location, expressing a preference for cash. I couldn't deny feeling a bit shocked, acknowledging that perhaps my grandfather wanted me to protect his cherished house and land, where he spent his life with my grandmother. "Wow, a house and land. That's pretty awesome, isn't it, Brian?" my boyfriend exclaimed in surprise upon hearing my story. Shaking my head, I implied that it wasn't as great as it sounded, given that my sister inherited $20 million in cash. "More impressive, I'd say," I remarked, feeling a sense of emptiness as I verbalized it. Trying to be modest, I continued, even though I was trying to be modest. "Beautiful and having money, now she's the better," Brian remarked insensitively. Earning a side glance from me, realizing his mistake, he jokingly added, "Your comfort means more to me than money." Brian had been my boyfriend since I started working, and we met at a social event. Although he hadn't proposed yet, I had been considering marriage, and today was our first date in the wild. I ended up sharing details about my inheritance with Brian, thinking he might become my husband someday. Little did I know that I would come to regret this. A few days later, as I visited the family home I had inherited, I planned to clean and sort out my grandfather's belongings. The property was large, but the house was modest. Contemplating the idea of moving in and living here leisurely with a cat, I considered the absence of rent payments, despite potential maintenance costs for deterioration. I had been working hard and saving, so it shouldn't be a problem. Someday, maybe with Brian. Feeling embarrassed at the thought, I shook my head vigorously and rolled up my sleeves to begin cleaning. Just then, I received a call, and my sister's name appeared on my smartphone screen. "Sis, what's up?" "Hey, Karen, having fun all by yourself in that old house?" My sister slurred, clearly intoxicated. She always had a unique way of extending her words, but today it was particularly bad. "Since you're drinking, aren't you?" "It's still afternoon," I pointed out with a sigh, to which she exaggeratedly sighed back, "Oh, you're such a Miss Goody Two-Shoes." "I was thinking about moving here eventually," I answered my sister's question, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "Really? I'm enjoying a suite in a luxury hotel right now." My sister raised her voice, sounding somewhat exaggerated. "Guess who I'm with right now?" "I have no idea," I replied, finding the situation rather boring. "It's that kind of attitude that'll make Brian dislike you," my sister quipped. "What?" "I'm sorry, Karen." I was flabbergasted when Brian's voice suddenly took over the line. The sudden intervention of Brian threw me off balance, and dizzying question marks popped up in my head. I resented my imagination at this point. A disgusting scenario had been completed in my head. Surprised, "Huh?" my sister's mean-spirited voice chimed in. "Ever since you introduced him to me, I thought Brian was quite a catch." She went on to boast about how she had been attracted to Brian since I introduced him, how she knew where he worked because of me, and how she had approached him as soon as he left work. He came along readily when she asked, telling her that she was hundreds of times more attractive than me. I listened in stunned silence, unable to utter a word. "Karen, I'm really sorry," Brian's voice came again. "Tell me it's a mistake." I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. As a man, I had to take this opportunity. I do feel bad about it, but come on, it's impossible to resist a beautiful woman who has $20 million, right? The way he spoke, as if asking me to understand, drained my emotions away, and I felt a cold sensation, like my blood was being drained from me. You know what? I don't need a man like you, I finally said, and I could hear my sister laughing uproariously in the background. The voice on the phone changed back to my sister. Well, that's how it is. And from now on, let's not consider ourselves sisters, okay? I wouldn't want you turning to me just because you're broke, she added before abruptly ending the call. Overwhelmed by emotions that had lied behind, all I could do was cry. It had been 5 years since that fateful call as I sat with a cat in my lap, dozing off in front of my laptop. The cat also peacefully slept. It was my day off, but there was still some work left from where I brought home. Oh no, this won't get the work done, I thought to myself, feeling guilty. But I had to gently move the cat off my lap. Just as I reached out to my laptop, my phone started to ring. An unfamiliar number was displayed on my smartphone. Thinking it could be work-related, I answered the call without any suspicion. Hello, Karen, long time no see. I instantly knew who it was and froze. The distinctive way of speaking was unmistakably my sister's. It's you, Karen, isn't it? I can tell just from your initial hello. After all, I'm your big sister. 5 years had passed, which should make Susan 34 years old. A smirk formed at the corner of my mouth at her unchanging way of talking. You're just the same. By the way, I came home, and there's a hotel standing. Did you sell a house? That's none of your business. Oh, come on. It's quite a grand hotel, huh? You must have made a good chunk of change, huh? Getting fed up? I was about to end the call when she started to chatter about her current situation. According to Susan, she had blown through the inheritance in about 2 years, and now she even had a considerable amount of debt. Even Brian, who she's still hanging around, seemed to be drowning in debt. I was speechless. Honestly, I couldn't care less. So, lend me some money, Susan requested, yelling. But I answered calmly, I've always wondered why Grandpa distributed his estate that way. But on the day you took Brian from me and cut ties, I understood. I started talking slowly, reminiscing about 5 years ago when Brian broke up with me, leaving me crushed. After crying my heart out, I sat dazed in my room, staring into space. I'm such a fool, I murmured, and large tears began to spill again. My gaze fell on a painting I had made as a child and had gifted to my grandfather. He had framed it and kept it hanging lovingly. Rising unsteadily, I picked up the painting. Grandpa. As I continued, my emotions swelled, and I started to cry. I recalled the notes my grandfather and I used to exchange on the back of that painting, like a family journal. Knowing that I was to inherit the house, he probably figured. I found this note. I'm glad I noticed, I said, shuddering at the thought that I might have left it unnoticed. I reached for a sheet of notepaper that had fallen from the back of the frame, with the note addressed to me. The date on the letter was just before my grandfather passed. I knew you'd definitely notice this letter. Right now, you're probably wondering why I distributed my estate in such a manner. I read aloud. Cash to you, a sister, and an old house and land for you. It may seem like I favored Susan, but that's not the case, the letter revealed, finally answering the question that had been bothering me. Despite any claims of favoritism, I wanted to leave most of my estate to you, bouqueted for me till the end. I finally understood what had been bothering me, and I continued to read the letter. But Susan would not be satisfied with a regular division. This child, even as her grandfather, I must admit, she's terribly greedy. Exactly, Grandpa? I whispered in agreement, though he couldn't hear me. She even took my boyfriend from me. That's what I want to tell him in my heart. That's why I arranged it this way, I read. While Susan may appear to have received the better deal at first glance, she won't pay attention to your share. According to Grandfather's letter, the value of this land in our area is continuously increasing due to ongoing urban development. As of the time I'm writing this, it's not worth Susan's $20 million yet. but the value of this land will surely increase in the future. As I read this far, my eyes widened in surprise. You can live here if you're attached to it, or you can sell it when its value rises enough to make a good profit. All I want is for you to be happy, grandfather's letter had said. When I finished conveying the content of the letter, Susan clicked her tongue and said, "Hag." I lived in that house for a while, but when my marriage was settled, I decided to sell the house. Just like grandfather's letter said, the land value had risen enough. "Anyway, I'm never lending you money," Susan declared. But as if she had a good idea, she added, "Right. If you want, I can give Brian back to you. So help your sister. It's a good deal, right?" At this moment, something inside me snapped. Enough was enough. You've been taken care of by my grandpa, and yet you haven't shown a hint of gratitude. I despise you for that, and you're not my sister anymore. Besides, I'm already married. I don't need Brian, and I don't even want to see his face. Stay out of my life for good. I said what I needed to say and hung up. I quickly set up call blocking, and my cat on my lap was cowering on the bed. I quickly picked up my cat and said, "I'm sorry." After that, it seems Susan contacted Brian, and they both stormed into our old house. Did they try to return Brian to me? There's a respectable end there now, but they must have misunderstood something and were shouting that they were my relatives. Even though I just sold the land and had nothing to do with it, it's simple for those two. I sold the land, and an inn was built equals I must be the owner of the inn. Of course, the staff reported to the police. The two of them were arrested because they had destroyed several items in the inn. Furthermore, it was discovered that they had been committing marriage fraud for money in the past. It seems they'll be sent to prison together. I was also questioned by the police, but I was able to prove that I had no involvement. Quickly, as we were estranged, I was released. As my husband, who came to pick me up, and I were walking through the station, we heard screaming and turned our gaze. There were Susan and Brian, who looked completely different. Fortunately, they didn't notice us. Both of them had messy hair, worn-out clothes, and looked nothing like the two people I remember. Especially Susan, who never skipped her makeup and fashion, looked even more different. They were probably being moved to a different location. As I watched the two of them, filled with a sense of melancholy, my husband and I locked eyes. I grabbed the hand he extended, and we left the police station. "Are you okay?" My husband, always concerned, looked at me with gentle eyes. "I'm okay. I have you and this little one." I touched my fairly noticeable belly and smiled back. In my belly, a new member of our family is growing. Money is important, but there's something even more valuable. That's what I want to teach our child, with my husband by my side. I am Nancy, and I have an older brother named Keith, who is 7 years my senior. Since childhood, Keith displayed exceptional academic prowess, excelling from an early age. He graduated from a prestigious high school and university, and naturally, our parents were immensely proud of him. They often spoke about Keith's remarkable achievements. Growing up in an environment where he was expected to excel and constantly praised, Keith's personality underwent some changes. Upon graduating from university and finding a job, he decided to leave our family home, sarcastically remarking, "I can't bear such a mundane life in this house anymore." I'll never forget the wry smile on his face at that moment. Our parents, visibly surprised and somewhat saddened, recalled how cheerful and cherished Keith used to be. Admittedly, I felt anger during that time. I didn't stand out academically or in sports, and my high school wasn't super prestigious. Still, I valued the bond and love within our family. Both Keith and I owed our lives to our parents' support, and I wished he felt the same. Throughout my high school years, I realized the warmth and love of a family are precious. Strangely, my brothers seemed immune to that love. Our parents showered us with endless affection, yet Keith perceived them as ordinary people. As a child, he was my hero, handling everything perfectly. He used to care, play, and help me study. However, by the time I was about to graduate high school, he started questioning the value of higher education and dismissed my pursuits. Whenever confronted, he blamed our parents, claiming he became this way because of them. I cried, but my parents reassured me, saying, "Nancy, you've grown into a truly kind-hearted person." Encouraged by their kindness, I entered a national university and secured a job at my dream company. By the time I started working, my parents were almost 60, and my brother was already married. Oddly enough, neither my parents nor I had met his wife. Despite numerous invitations, he hesitated, citing considerations about introducing her to our family. About half a year into my new life as a working professional, an unexpected event disrupted my routine. During work hours, I received a personal call from my usually aware mother. Concerned, she inquired about my well-being and then dropped the bombshell. "Your father suddenly fell." My heart sank, and I immediately informed my supervisor, rushed to catch a taxi, and hurried to the hospital my mother had mentioned along the way. As I made my way to the hospital, my mind was filled with repeated hopes and prayers for my father's well-being. Upon entering the waiting room, a heart-wrenching scene unfolded. My mother, tears streaming down her face, greeted me with visible distress. "What happened, Mom?" I asked, settling beside her with a heavy heart. The morning had started like any other, and the sudden turn of events left me unable to process the unfolding situation. Words poured out of me, one after another, seeking answers. After a pause, my mother quietly uttered, "Your father has been diagnosed with cancer." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave, causing time to momentarily stand still. The shock, surprise, and anxiety within me spilled out in my voice as I questioned, "Why?" Taking a deep breath, my mother began to speak with a tone laced with sadness. "It's stage 4. The cancer has spread to the bile duct, and they said it's hard to remove it all." Her tears flowed uncontrollably, and I struggled to find words as I listened, grappling with the weight of the news. Seeking a glimmer of hope, I asked, "What treatment will be done next?" My mother nodded somberly, and after a brief pause, the attending physician entered to explain the detailed condition and treatment plan. The reality of my father's illness had surpassed expectations, with confirmed metastasis to other parts. Even if they operated, there was a significant risk, and success couldn't be guaranteed. In the heavy silence of the waiting room, my mother and I held hands, attempting to come to terms with this harsh reality. The doctor's matter-of-fact words emphasized the crucial choices ahead: continuing with chemotherapy or opting for support in a palliative care ward. The ticking of the clock's second hand seemed to carve through the atmosphere, underscoring the gravity of the situation. Contemplating how to navigate this challenging moment, I suggested involving my brother Keith in the decision-making process. Picking up my smartphone with a forced smile, I informed my mother that I had already attempted to contact Keith. However, recalling his past behavior and nature, I sensed a premonition: his reluctance to face tough decisions. Despite his potential resistance, I persevered, believing in the importance of gathering the family's opinions. After numerous attempts, I finally heard my brother's slightly irritated voice, urgently and anxiously. I pressed him to understand our father's condition, emphasizing the need for his presence at the hospital. His dismissive response lacked empathy, shaking me to the core, as I reminded him of our father's immense contributions to our family. Tears threatened to spill as I confronted my brother's apparent indifference to our father's critical condition. However, my brother, devoid of any visible emotion, briskly stated, "Now is not the time to be fussing over this. There's no point in discussing further. I'm hanging up," and promptly ended the call. Stunned by the exchange, I found myself at a loss. My astonishment at my brother's indifference was evident. I had known he lacked a sense of family bond and gratitude, but I never imagined he had grown into such a detached person. Returning to my mother, a look of concern was etched on her face. "What happened?" she inquired. I replied, "It seems he is quite busy now, avoiding the details." My mother sighed deeply, murmuring, "It would have been comforting if Keith was here." In the following months, my father chose to spend his final moments in a palliative care ward, and after that decision, he quietly passed away, I informed my brother of the somber news over the phone, conveying the details of the wake and funeral. However, his response was cold, stating, "I'm busy with work, so I can't attend. Please proceed without me." True to his word, he didn't appear at our father's wake or funeral. Even my mother seemed shocked by this fact. She probably never imagined her son wouldn't show up for his father's funeral. Both family and acquaintances expressed their surprise and disappointment at his absence. After the funeral, when a moment of quiet settled among the family, my mother exhaled deeply, muttering to herself, "He really didn't come." I took her hand and said firmly, "Mom, let's not worry about him anymore. We have to let him walk his path. For now, let's cherish our memories of Dad." In response, my mother tightly squeezed my hand and smiled, saying, "Thank you." Unbelievably, the next day, my older brother suddenly appeared at the apartment where we live. When I opened the door, his expression was different from usual, filled with an urgent restlessness. Stepping inside, he demanded, without any greeting, "Where is the inheritance father left behind?" Shocked by his demand, I emotionally retorted, "Seriously? Someone who didn't even show up at the funeral. And now you're saying this?" Visibly irritated, my brother snapped, "Kids should stay quiet," instantly tensing the atmosphere. My mother stepped forward to calm the situation, explaining, "Apart from this apartment, your father didn't leave much behind. There's no way that's true." Retorting in frustration, my brother barely concealed his anger. Remaining calm, my mother placed my father's passbook on the table for him to see. Flipping through it, it became clear that all the savings our father had were transferred to a different account. "What is this all about?" my brother exclaimed in surprise. Gently, my mother replied, "Your father had instructed to move all the money to my account earlier. Also, this apartment's name has been changed, and now it's in my name." Taken aback, my brother was at a loss for words. He merely clicked his tongue in frustration and left. As we watched his departing figure, we were once again filled with admiration and gratitude for our father's foresight and his plan to protect the family. A few months later, my mother suddenly fell, and she was immediately taken to the hospital. It was completely unexpected, and the family was filled with shock and concern. The diagnosis revealed that she had pneumonia, and it was in a more advanced stage than we thought. I recalled that she had been coughing slightly lately, and when she visited a small clinic, the diagnosis was a minor cold. Relieved by this news, we didn't think much of it. However, more detailed examinations at a major hospital revealed a much more severe condition, giving her only about 3 months to live. Hearing this news left me speechless, as it seemed unimaginable, especially considering how healthy she appeared. Tragically, just a few days after the 3-month mark, my mother quietly passed away, leaving a space filled with an indescribable stillness and sorrow. Filled with guilt and grief, I questioned why I didn't notice sooner and why I didn't take her to a bigger hospital immediately. Even after learning about my mother's pain, there was no sign of my brother coming to our house. My aunt, my mother's sister, and I handled the arrangements for the wake and the funeral. Understandably, my brother's absence was a significant shock for my aunt, just as it had been during our father's funeral. However, expecting or saying anything to my brother felt meaningless, given his past actions. A few days after the funeral, as my aunt and I were sorting out the heirlooms, my brother appeared again, accompanied by his wife, whom we were meeting for the first time. He bluntly inquired about our mother's inheritance, assuming she must have left something. Shocked and dumbfounded, my aunt stared at him in disbelief. The most astonishing part was that beside my brother stood his wife, my new sister-in-law, who neither met our eyes nor greeted us. She just stood silently next to my brother. Even more shocking was that my brother didn't even visit our mother's grave. Trying to maintain calmness, I suggested, "Brother, please at least pay your respects to our parents. Visit Mom's grave." However, he responded dismissively, "Does that even mean anything?" He quickly followed up with, "By the way, how much of Mom's inheritance is left?" At that moment, May's expression changed drastically. In a voice filled with anger, contrasting with her usual warmth. She sternly admonished Keith. How can you think of such things at a time like this? Nancy is managing the funeral on behalf of both of you, putting in all her effort. Shouldn't you act with a bit of gratitude, thinking of your parents? However, my brother completely ignored our aunt's anger, responding dismissively, Auntie, it's none of your business. Don't interfere. With demands made by both my brother and sister-in-law, the atmosphere in the room became cold and tense. Behind my brother, his smiling sister-in-law remarked, Of course, I remember your name, Nancy. Do you plan to keep all of your mother's inheritance for yourself? Sorry, but we can't allow that. This apartment is so lovely. I think it's perfect for us. I never imagined that my brother and his wife would make such audacious demands. Why should I have to leave for the sake of both of you? I asked, my voice quivering. Undeterred, my sister-in-law continued, twirling her finger. This apartment has just been renovated, and its location is amazing. It's close to the station, and there are plenty of shops, so we'll be living here. My anger reached its peak, and I couldn't hold back. Big brother, all you care about is the inheritance. What are you thinking? Turning away, my brother let out a heavy sigh, remarking, Such vulgar behavior. Do you think raising your voice solves everything? We'll be back here in 3 days. Have everything ready to move out by then. Their intentions became crystal clear with those words. A mix of my anger and sadness bubbled up, and I couldn't stop my tears from flowing. However, this wasn't just a one-time event. Determined, I wiped my tears. My aunt gently tapped my shoulder and handed me a letter. The delicate handwriting of my mother adorned the envelope's surface. What's this, Auntie? I asked, carefully opening the envelope. Your mother entrusted this to me for a just-in-case scenario. She told me to give it to you at the right moment, my aunt said, tears forming in her eyes. Unfolding the paper inside, my mother's beautiful handwriting filled the page. To my precious Nancy, if you are reading this letter, it means I'm no longer in this world. I'm truly sorry for our parting. Warmth filled my eyes, tears beginning to flow. You might have Keith visit the house concerning the inheritance, but don't worry, everything that your father handed down to me is now yours. I was at a loss for words. I had no idea my mother had thought this far ahead and prepared everything in advance. I'm sorry for suddenly leaving you alone, but I'm at peace because I've seen how much you've grown into a wonderful person. While learning is essential, it's not everything. The kindness and compassion you learn through your interactions with people are what I believe hold the most value. Your father and I were genuinely happy to see you grow up with such a warm heart until our last days. Words can't express just how proud we are of you. I truly want to express my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you. Overwhelmed, I read on, deeply moved. Mom. The words before me blurred with my tears, but I was determined to take in every sentiment my mother had conveyed and continued reading. Actually, after your father passed away, following his wishes, I secretly changed the apartment's ownership to your name. I'm sorry for using your seal without permission, but it was both your father's and my wish. Please don't be angry. Life has its ups and downs. Even when things get tough, we want you to persevere and live your life fully, so stay strong and find your happiness. The letter ended there, tears streaming down my face, wetting the paper. My aunt, standing next to me, pressed her eyes and shed tears alongside me. Your sister truly cared about you. In her heart, you were a treasure, my aunt said, gently holding my hand. From the envelope, a bank book in my name emerged. It seemed like something my mother must have secretly made in the past. To my surprise, when I opened the bank book, a substantial amount was recorded. I felt that this was probably the inheritance from my father that my mother had saved for me. A few days later, my brother and his wife showed up at the house without even knocking on the door. They entered as if it was their own home. It's time for you to leave, just as promised, right? My brother sarcastically said. As I stood still, my sister-in-law became irritated. Isn't it your duty to leave quickly? She said, almost as a command. For a moment, I felt overwhelmed by the atmosphere, but I took a deep breath, looked them straight in the eyes, and said calmly, Actually, this house is now under my name." With that statement, the room's atmosphere became tense. My brother and his wife looked at each other, exclaiming, "What? What kind of joke is this? I am the eldest son. I should inherit the house, right?" Clearly shaken, my brother said. Beside him, my sister-in-law stared at me, saying, "This is the first I've heard of this." However, I had decided to state the facts. The house and the inheritance are all managed under my name, so there's nothing to divide. My brother frowned. "Then hand over half of that inheritance to us." But I questioned his face turning red. This money was left for my future and to ensure that I take care of the house. "You always looked down on me, and now you're asking for money? What changed?" Surprisingly, my sister-in-law exclaimed, "Wait, what is this? This isn't what we were expecting." From what I gathered, my brother recently faced significant trouble at his job and was subsequently fired. Not only that, but he and his wife were moving from one day job to another, seemingly in a tight spot financially. They probably had high hopes for my mother's inheritance and the house. But with my revelation, their expectations were shattered, and they began bickering, placing blame on one another. Watching their childish dispute, I thought, what can possibly be gained from all this? To them, I said calmly, "This is my house now. If you make any unnecessary fuss, I'll call the police." Trembling with anger, they reluctantly accepted my words and left. Since then, I've had no contact with them. I deliberately deleted all their contact details and began a new life in this apartment. This apartment is my treasure, filled with memories of my father and mother. Now I have a loving partner by my side. We plan to build a new family in this apartment. He respects my decision and proposed that we take the first step of our new life here. Our future is bright, and I want to pass on the warm love my parents gave me to the children we will have in the future. My grandson David faced his inaugural winter this year, marked by a record cold day according to the weather report. Concerns for David and his mother, Yvonne, crept into my thoughts. I worried that the frigid night might have taken a toll on her health. In an attempt to quell my unease, I sent Yvonne a message on my smartphone, asking about their well-being and urging them to guard against catching a cold. Despite my efforts, there was no response, not even a read receipt. Yvonne had always been responsible, so her silence raised my anxiety. After an hour of futile waiting, I tried calling, but my attempts proved fruitless. Realizing this was no trivial matter, a sense of urgency overcame me. I hastily donned a thick jumper and rushed to drive to my son's family apartment. However, when I rang the intercom, there was no response. Fearing the worst, that Yvonne might have collapsed inside, I persuaded the building manager to open the door. The apartment was shrouded in darkness, with only faint street lamp light seeping in. Searching along the wall, I fumbled for the light switch, but my repeated attempts yielded no illumination. Anxious and irritated, I resorted to using my smartphone's flashlight to explore. "Yvonne, are you there?" I called out, wondering if they were simply out. Just as I contemplated leaving, a faint cry echoed from the bedroom, prompting me to rush towards it. In the bedroom, I found Yvonne shivering from the cold, desperately wrapping newborn David in a sheet to keep him warm. To my shock, I noticed Yvonne's once long, proud black hair was now chopped off, almost completely shaved. Bewildered, I questioned, "What happened here?" "My name is Mary Smith," a 61-year-old woman who had worked as a hairstylist for many years, running a salon out of my home. My husband and I had started the salon together, but he passed away from cancer when our son, Harry, was young. Despite the challenges, I raised Harry single-handedly. He often skipped school and got into trouble, leaving me to wonder if my parenting played a role. One day, Harry surprised me by expressing a desire to become a hairstylist. Initially shocked, I decided to support him in this newfound interest. After graduating from cosmetology school, Harry became an apprentice at a senior salon, where he met Yvonne. Their relationship blossomed, and soon Harry proposed to her, declaring his intention to marry. Meeting Yvonne, with her long black hair and bright smile, left me instantly liking her. A year after their marriage, Harry aspired to start his own salon. Despite his relatively short time as an apprentice, he exuded confidence as a hairstylist. Yearning to establish my own space and showcase my skills, I felt a tinge of concern. Drawing from my experience, I understood the challenges newcomers face in the industry. However, I couldn't dismiss the earnestness in Harry's eyes as he spoke about his dream. Curious about his financial standing, I inquired about his savings. Harry shared his bank book with a troubled expression and a sigh. Despite having a stable income, Harry's spending mirrored his earnings, leaving him far from accumulating enough to launch his own business. He had been squandering a significant portion of his earnings on leisure activities. While I contemplated advising him to reconsider, I chose to reassure him, saying, "Don't worry about the money. Enjoy indulging yourself." Perhaps it was my way of compensating for the loneliness of my fatherless upbringing. Confiding in my late husband's portrait, I revealed that I hadn't touched the life insurance money he left behind, reserved for Harry. Consulting with a knowledgeable regular in real estate, we identified a perfect property, an old barber shop that had recently retired due to old age. Another regular offered her husband's assistance during the renovation, and with my son, who was studying architecture, home for the summer break, we got the construction underway. Upon receiving approval from the health department, the salon opened surprisingly quickly, grateful for the support. I acknowledged that setting up the business wasn't something I could have accomplished alone. Handing Harry the bank book containing the remaining inheritance, I emphasized its purpose for his business expenses. With more than half the funds remaining, I urged him not to waste it. Harry chuckled in annoyance, assuring me he understood, and Yvonne, with a bright smile, promised to keep a close eye on his spending. With Yvonne's help, I felt relieved from worries and decided to oversee their business from a distance. However, my optimism waned as Yvonne occasionally updated me on their progress. 3 months after the salon's opening, she confided that Harry seemed disengaged, causing a decline in customer satisfaction and a loss of clientele. Perplexed, I couldn't fathom what had changed so rapidly. Yvonne explained that Harry, initially confident that his skills alone would attract customers, had overlooked the importance of customer service in running a salon. Realizing that Harry lacked this fundamental understanding, I grew concerned about the future success of their venture. "So, what's Harry up to now?" Yvonne explained that he's frustrated about the lack of customers and spends his days drinking. She expressed concern that if he doesn't get his act together, they'll lose even more clients. Currently, she's handling the existing customers, but with the continual drop in reputation, the business is on a downward spiral. Listening to Yvonne's worries, I felt a similar sense of despair. Promising to address the issue, I assured her that I would have a serious talk with Harry the next time I saw him. Grateful for the support, Yvonne bowed deeply, brushing back her long black hair. Trying to lighten the mood, I complimented Yvonne on her stunning hair, and she proudly shared that she had been growing it out since middle school for hair donation. She explained that it involves making wigs from real hair for children who have lost their hair due to congenital diseases, illnesses, or accidents. Yvonne had been growing her hair with the intention of donating it to organizations involved in this cause, expressing the joy of being able to help someone. Moved by Yvonne's passion and dedication, I commended her for such admirable actions, especially considering her young age. As the conversation unfolded, Yvonne revealed that 6 months into her marriage with Harry, she became pregnant. Despite being conscientious and hardworking, she continued working at the salon until the last month of her pregnancy, supporting the family while Harry's attitude worsened. Feeling my own shortcomings as a mother, I decided to check on their salon one day after finishing work early. I encountered Harry as he was about to leave for a drink, dismissing the lack of customers as normal. Attempting to make him realize the impending fatherhood, he shrugged it off and left. Inside the salon, I found Yvonne cleaning the floor, having managed just one customer that day. Despite her exhaustion, she smiled brightly. Concerned about her well-being, I sternly emphasized the importance of proper nutrition, especially for the baby. Yvonne teared up and thanked me, expressing gratitude for the support. Learning from Yvonne that the salon was struggling and Harry was spending money recklessly, I couldn't help but feel that giving him the bank book was a mistake. The situation seemed dire, and I couldn't shake the frustration and disappointment in Harry's lack of responsibility during such a crucial time. I found myself regretting my decision. Despite being occupied, Yvonne never neglected her hair care. As she gently stroked her belly, she expressed her desire to teach her child the joy of helping others. It dawned on me that I wanted to support her, especially since my son wasn't contributing much. Recognizing my shortcomings in raising my son, I decided to assist Yvonne at their apartment. Acknowledging the inconvenience, Yvonne would apologize, but I assured her not to worry and encouraged her to focus on the baby. I felt responsible for not raising my son properly, leading to Yvonne's suffering. It seemed like my way of atoning for my past mistakes. Towards the end of summer, Yvonne went into labor earlier than expected, and she was rushed to the hospital. Unfortunately, Harry was nowhere to be found, unreachable despite my attempts to contact him. I sent messages, but there were no replies, not even read receipts. It left me bewildered about his whereabouts during such a crucial time. With Yvonne's parents no longer around, I became the sole person there for her. I reassured Yvonne during the challenging childbirth, providing encouragement as she bravely faced the process. After a long and difficult labor, the sound of the baby's cries overwhelmed me. "He's born." "You did it, Yvonne." I was moved to tears, but Harry, who should have been present, never showed up. Meanwhile, my grandson David was experiencing his first winter, and the weather report indicated a record cold day. Concerned about Yvonne and newborn David, I sent a message that night, but there was no response, hastening my worry. After attempting to call without success, I decided to visit their apartment immediately. Upon arrival, the place was shrouded in darkness. Considering the possibility of a family trip, I rang the intercom, but there was no response. Fearing for Yvonne's well-being, I asked the building manager to open the door. The apartment was dark, and my attempts to turn on the lights proved futile. Using my smartphone's flashlight, I called out to Yvonne in the living room, receiving no response. As I was about to leave, a faint cry of a baby reached my ears from the bedroom. Rushing towards the sound, I discovered Yvonne shivering from the cold, wrapping newborn David in a sheet. To my shock, her once long, proud black hair had been roughly cut off, and her eyes, red and swollen from crying, looked at me helplessly. Overwhelmed, I exclaimed, "This is terrible. How did this happen?" I removed my jumper and draped it over Yvonne. Assuring her, I said, "It's okay now. Just tell me what happened, as much as you can." Yvonne began to speak slowly, revealing that Harry continued his daily escapades even after David was born. Financial struggles escalated, leading to an inability to pay the electric bill. Yvonne, unable to tolerate the situation any longer, scolded Harry, hoping he would become a more responsible father. However, her pleas fell on deaf ears. In a fit of rage, Harry grabbed a pair of practice hair-cutting scissors and started cutting off Yvonne's hair. Initially resisting and telling him to stop, Yvonne ceased her resistance, fearing any further struggle might accidentally harm David. Harry mocked Yvonne, stating, "Now you won't be able to show your face in public." I was left speechless at my son's cruel actions. Yvonne apologized, blaming herself again, but I reassured her, expressing that it was not her fault. I hugged Yvonne tightly, tears streaming down my face. The whole situation was a result of my overindulgence in raising Harry. My heart burned with shame and anger at my own failings and my son's inability to empathize with others. Taking a deep breath, I called Harry. "Hey, Mom, long time no talk. What's up?" Harry responded casually, and I inquired about Yvonne and David's well-being. There was a brief pause in his voice, and he claimed they were in Hawaii and would be back next week. Despite knowing he was lying, I responded positively. Reflecting on the years of taking care of Harry after losing my husband, I felt profound disappointment. Harry's careless use of his father's inheritance and mistreatment of his family shattered my expectations. A week later, Harry called me cheerfully, announcing his return from Hawaii. Pretending to be the caring son, he mentioned souvenirs, but my heart was no longer deceived by his act. Informing the building manager of my plans, I decided to take Yvonne and David back to my house. I made calls to every possible place. An hour later, Harry called, announcing his arrival at the airport. Despite his cheerful demeanor, my heart was wary. When a taxi pulled up in front of the apartment, Harry, displaying tan lines from sunglasses around his eyes, struggled with the key, realizing it wouldn't fit the lock. Frustration etched across his face. He exclaimed, "What's going on here?" I approached him quietly from behind, wearing a smile that masked the boiling anger in my heart. "Did you enjoy your trip to Hawaii?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Harry's relieved expression shifted as he saw me, mistaking the situation. "Mom, you're here," he said, his voice tinged with relief, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Listen, Mom, I just got back and tried to enter the house, but the key won't fit. It must be Yvonne's prank, punishing me for going on a trip alone," Harry explained, attempting to paint himself as the victim and blame Yvonne for their troubles. "What were you doing? I told you I was in Hawaii with my family," he continued, caught in his own web of lies. Pointing out the contradiction, I left Harry at a loss for words. "You really had the nerve to lie about taking a family trip to Hawaii," I said, my disappointment palpable. Yvonne had been left behind, shivering in the cold with David, while Harry indulged in his own desires. To think she cherished her long hair, and you just cut it off mercilessly. "Don't you feel any remorse as a human being?" I questioned, my voice heavy with emotion. But Harry showed no signs of remorse, only theatrics about the cold and his desire to enter the house. It was then that I dropped the bombshell. I had canceled the lease on the apartment. Harry protested, but the truth was, he had no right to complain. Taking him to a nearby coffee shop to talk further, Harry sat silently, his pale face betraying his inner turmoil. Eventually, he confessed his selfish reasoning, admitting to his reckless spending and empty promises. I shattered his illusions, telling him I had already sold the salon and the equipment, leaving him with nothing to reclaim. His protests fell on deaf ears as I calmly left the coffee shop, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions. In the following month, Harry's life spiraled further downward. His pleas for help were met with cold shoulders, and he faced legal repercussions for his reckless behavior. As for Yvonne and David, they found solace in our salon. Yvonne, regaining her strength, filed for divorce and threw herself into her work. With David's cheerful presence, the salon blossomed, attracting more customers drawn to Yvonne's warmth. Though the pain caused by Harry's actions lingers, we find solace in the smiles that now fill our salon. And in a quiet corner, David sleeps peacefully, his innocence a reminder of the brighter future ahead.